Hello, and thank you to the regular board, let me start over. It's 1 o'clock. Good afternoon. Welcome to the work session for the Board of County Commissioners on Tuesday, May 9th. We are going to begin with a staff community presentation about our investment portfolio update. We have Julie Hughes and Scott Prickett from Chander Asset Management. And Ann is here as well. Triggers. Welcome, guys. See if I can find this big document.
Right. Well, it's always good to be here in person, so it's nice to see everyone again, and not in 2D, but actual 3D. That's always nice. And I will present the economic update today, and I'll turn it over to Julie to talk about the portfolio. But please feel free to interrupt if you have any questions for either myself or Julie as we present the information. So, and if you want to move on to the first slide, there we go. So, what we're seeing right now is deceleration in economic trends, but probably not to the extent that the Fed would prefer relative to what they're focusing on, and that's primarily, but not exclusively, inflation. And they're also seeing a fairly resilient employment picture as well. We did see the results of the senior loan survey. Lift this up
That should
a
be
little
good.
bit. There we go. And we're seeing a tightening in financial conditions, tightening of loans, and also loan demand is down as well. So
Okay, so what does
Yes.
that mean, tightening of loans?
Sure, that just means that, the grease in the wheels of the economy, a very important cog, is credit. And when that tightens up, if you will, for example, banks not willing to lend as easily, and you also have conditions relative to both businesses and consumers relative to their own situation. One not thinking they can get a loan, or they're in a circumstance where it's not as easy, certainly, as it was a few years ago to get access to credit. That's the tightening
Okay.
of conditions.
Thank you.
Is what we're looking at. And historically speaking, that circumstance has precluded and been in conjunction with a recession. So now we're not calling for, our firm is not calling for a recession to occur in the latter half of this year or even next year. But we also think that the conditions are ripe, if you will, for a recession to occur. And the chances are elevated right now for a recession. Possibly at the end of this year, but most likely into 2024. There's some indicators that would scream that, historically speaking, for example, and I'll touch on it later, the 12th consecutive month of a negative number on the leading economic indicators. The correlation with recessions is quite high relative to that circumstance. But we also are in a unique circumstance, and I'm really jumping ahead with what I'm saying here in terms of the slides I'll review. But the employment picture has been certainly different than what we've experienced in past recessions. Historic blows relative to those that are looking for a job and they can't find one. The JOLTS, or the job openings and labor turnover survey, still is showing about 1.7 job openings, give or take, for each available worker. So we'll see what that looks like in about 6 months to a year. Things can change quickly, but overall it's a pretty strong employment picture. And that's actually the first slide I have here relative to half of the Fed's mandate. So we've got non-farm payrolls on the left-hand side. The last number was 253,000 in terms of job creation. And then on the right-hand side, the more commonly viewed, if you will, the unemployment rate at 3.4%. So I'm going to update some of the numbers that are on this particular slide. And then earnings, year-over-year earnings for workers up 4.4%. And so that is a closely watched number by the Fed as well relative to what the inflationary picture looks like. And that's on the following page. And this is this page has both the CPI, Consumer Price Index, and the personal consumption expenditures on the right-hand side. So we're going to get another CPI report tomorrow. The expectations are for 5% and 5.5% for core CPI. And then again, on the right-hand side, 4.2% and 4.6% for core. But what's relevant here and the takeaway here is the Fed wants to see 2% inflation. That's their target. So we still have a long way to go from 4.6% to 2%. And the deceleration of, if you looked at this line and you look at the scale on the bottom there from year to year, 21, 22, 23, you can see the deceleration, is not going to allow for a 2% inflation rate, certainly by the end of this year. And it's more likely well into the future, the next couple of years. But we'll see.
Assuming that the graph follows the characteristics that are in it right now.
Exactly.
Which
exactly.
they don't necessarily have to do. I mean,
That's absolutely right.
okay.
Yep.
Can I go back to the
Sure.
employment thing for just a second?
Of course.
So I'm kind of surprised that the average wages haven't gone up more, because I know in this area, for instance, in my business, in order to keep and get people, I had to go up between 15 and 25% in what
Sure.
I pay. So kind of surprised that it's only 4-point-something%, because most people I've talked to have said the same thing. Most businesses have said the same thing. We have to pay so much more now to keep
Right,
people.
right. Yeah, and it, for probably obvious reason, it depends on the area you're in
Yeah.
as well. We've seen a deceleration of that number as well in terms of year-over-year earnings. And we're seeing it with that particular number as well. And it's really dependent upon what part of the sector you're in terms of, like, are you in services or are you in tech? We've seen a lot of tech layoffs, but the strength in the services industry is still there. But also those, for the most part, those are much lower paying positions.
Right.
So that is taking off, and then you have layoffs in much higher positions, or higher paying positions, if you will.
Yeah, so that balances a little bit, yeah. Okay, great, thank you.
Exactly. And then moving on to the ever-important consumer. Still pretty resilient, but we're starting to see some signs that is changing slightly. You've got retail sales on the left-hand side of the slide here and consumer confidence on the right. Year over year, the latest number down 2.9% for retail sales, month over month down 1%. And then the trend in consumer confidence also is downward sloping at 101.3. So one thing that is supporting certainly the consumer confidence is what we were talking about earlier in terms of employment. If you have a job, it's tough to be as negative in your outlook relative to those who, especially when we've seen unemployment rates and, knocking on the door of double digits. Rare, but it has happened. And even elevated to like north of 5%, then that certainly affects the consumer confidence read.
And
So,
Scott,
I'm sorry.
could I just jump in? I wanted to let you know that yesterday we received the sales tax numbers for March 2023, and it was down just 1% from March 2022. So it's the first time we've actually seen a slight softening.
shrinking.
Yeah, we thought it would happen sooner, but December, January, and February were very, very strong, but March we're definitely and hearing in the community that things are starting to get a little soft. So we're starting to see a decline.
I have a couple of questions about this one. Does anybody else have questions before me? So consumer, how would we measure consumer confidence other than retail sales? And I'm wondering what the numbers, it says index level, what do those numbers mean? I don't really understand those numbers.
Are
110,
you talking about the level on the right with the 101.3, what I just quoted, and 80, 90, 100, 110, so that index level. Yeah, that's just a gauge historically that, and they really do, call individual households relative to the questionnaires that they provide consumers.
And so what do those numbers mean? That's just like a grading system of?
Sure, and really, maybe the line of demarcation here is 100. So, I can't remember the exact number we saw in 2000, the financial crisis. It was historically low. Do you remember exactly what that number was? It's, to give again, don't quote me on this, but it was, I'm going to give myself a wide latitude here and say it was between 20 and 50.
I think it
So-
was in the 20s.
Yeah.
Significantly lower.
Yeah, significantly lower. So that gives you an idea of where we are right now. So, a takeaway from this is the consumer and their confidence is still holding up pretty well, backward looking, if you will. So we are seeing signs, for example, the average consumer dipping into their savings, and that was built up significantly over the past few years. And also revolving credit or credit card debt is starting to increase as well. So those are early signs of stress put on the average consumer.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
And then economic activity on the following page. I'm just going to focus on the left-hand side here, the leading economic indicators. And I had mentioned this in the opening statement I made, down 1.2%. And it's the 12th consecutive month for it to be negative, and it's certainly a contraction signal for the economy. And then I'm going to jump to housing starts. So supply is still an issue with regard to housing on a national basis. Definitely real estate is local. We all know that. But on a national basis, we still have a supply issue. Month over month, housing starts are down 0.8%. Year over year, 17.2%. And so supply certainly has an effect relative to what we're looking at on the right-hand side. But latest Case-Shiller 20-city composite. So that is a price composite of the 20 of the largest cities in the United States. And year over year now, it's only up 0.36%. And there's a significant, yeah, do you have a question? Sure.
I was wondering if you had that housing starts chart for the state of Colorado in light of all the
Sure.
activity in the legislature this winter.
We
And
can,
actually, I have it because I attended a presentation by Dr. Wilbekind of the Leeds School of Business, and I'll forward that to all of you, and it's all about the Colorado economy.
That'd be great.
And you
thanks.
too.
Yeah, I think that could be helpful to us because
okay.
Yeah, that'd be
we're
really great.
still going to be working on, trying to affect the legislation going forward.
Sure.
You know.
Sure. Yeah, and on the Front Range, we have accounts all over Colorado. They're starting to see, especially in some areas like the southern part of Denver, a few bidding wars. That surprised me at a presentation we gave at a city south of Denver. There was a couple of real estate agents that sit on the city council. And so on this particular slide, I really wanted to turn it over to them. So that was an interesting dynamic. And both of them said it was a significant surprise with strength that they're seeing versus what they're expecting. So
So you mean people offering more than something is listed at and bidding to see?
yes, exactly.
My sister had to do that in Massachusetts a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Yes, Kelly.
Do we know if the multifamily housing starts trends are tied to interest rate conditions? Okay.
Yes, yeah, for sure. I mean, we've got a significant increase in mortgage levels over the course of the past year and a half. And that's certainly affecting the dispersion between, multifamily and single-family housing. And affordability is a key factor there. Even filling positions in the public sector, we've come across over the past year a couple of openings that couldn't be filled because a certain candidate couldn't give up their 3.5% mortgage and move into a more expensive area, even though the job offer was quote unquote better and a higher paying position, but the offset just wasn't there relative to the cost of housing, as well as the higher interest rate of going from 3.5 to 6.25, I believe it was.
Sure.
6.25 right now?
It's about that level. Great questions. Makes it doing this so much easier.
I wonder why low interest financing for multifamily isn't more part of on the menu of in the conversations that I have or
Okay.
am part of with people.
Sure. Okay.
Like in this type of environment, it could really patch the gap you know,
Right.
thank you.
And the composite home price index graph, it's still been increasing, but the increase is slowing.
Yes,
That's what we're
exactly.
seeing.
Yeah. And based on the slope of the line, I wouldn't be surprised at all if the next number was negative on a year-over-year basis. And there's a significant difference between what we're seeing, especially in the southeast and on the western half of the United States, if you will. Denver was down in this 20-city composite 1.23%, but the most significant decline was in San Francisco, and that was, if I recall, 10.02%.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, negative 10, north of 10% for San Francisco on a year-over-year basis. But Miami was north of 10%. So 10% plus in Miami. So Miami, Atlanta.
One coast to the other.
Yeah, exactly. What other cities? Tampa have all experienced significant increases over the past year.
Yeah.
And then manufacturing on the following page, again, a similar situation relative to, on the left-hand side, expanding versus contracting situation with what's called the ISM, Institute of Supply Management, currently at 47.1, so indicative of a contracting manufacturing picture. And then you can see, really more importantly than the last absolute number in terms of industrial production, the trend line down slightly relative to that particular gauge. And then importantly, on the next page, the gross domestic product, first quarter and first read at 1.1%. We're looking at the last sentence here, the consensus estimate at 0.3% for the second quarter and 1.2% growth for the full year of 2023. So that doesn't really reconcile with, if that came to pass, a recession. Again, the Bureau of Economic Research is the organization that declares a recession, and right now there's numerous factors that they consider, and a significant factor in their calculation is the employment picture. So you can see on this chart, the matrix on the left-hand side, we did get a couple of quarters, actually the prior negative quarter dropped off, but we had 2 consecutive negative quarters. But the Bureau of Economic Research did not declare a recession because of the other factors that they consider. So as we move into the rest of this year, if we see the deceleration in economic strength, we might be in a position latter half of this year or next year where the Bureau actually declares, we're in a recession. Sometimes it's not real useful because it's information that it's almost like saying the sky's blue when you're in it. But nonetheless, that might occur, and it'll certainly affect the shape of the yield curve and what the Fed policy will be as we move forward. And speaking of Fed policy.
Well, before.
Yes, absolutely.
So I read the New York Times every day.
Uh-huh.
And the economic reporting on it is always, the jobs market looks great, but there's always a but. Doesn't matter how good the news is, there's always this, but we could be doing this. There's going to be a recession. The inflation isn't coming down fast enough. What makes them not say but?
Well, like for example, we've had tens of thousands of announced layoffs and actual layoffs in the tech sector, as I mentioned before. And it's gravitating to firms outside of tech as well, like 3M. They announced layoffs as well. So when you start seeing that layoff creep, if you will, but as I said earlier, and
That's
I've got.
a good thing?
No, you said the but. So
No,
if we
but
didn't
I
have.
mean, what kind of economic report would be positive? Like, the economy is great.
Yeah,
We never see that.
yeah.
It's never reported like that. There's always exceptions to, this is really great, and this is really great, but this is gonna happen if
Right.
it keeps up like this, or
Yeah.
it's always
Yeah.
doomsday.
And historically, yeah, you're right. And remember the journalists
sell
and
newspapers.
the eyeballs,
Not
the
newsworthy.
eyeballs they're trying to
Definitely.
get on their headlines. I mean, I think that's always important to consider. How many times was it clicked on? And if you have the headline, everything is great, come back next month. No one's going to read that article.
I think they
But-
would if it were the economy.
No, see, if they give you doomsday and something good happens, it's that much better.
It's never reported as better. So, I mean,
But-
what would be indicators of a strong economy without all these little caveats, except for this, except for this? What would be
Well,
an
it's,
indicator?
it's hard for me, and I'll turn over to Julie for her opinion as well in a moment, but it's hard for me to picture a situation where everything is perfect. And that's because that's never the case, at least in my 35 years of doing this. There's always been a but, you know, and sometimes it's related to one's own paradigm relative to what value they place on certain aspects, depending on if you're an economist and how you look at it on a micro basis and all the data versus the average citizen out there. And seeing the headline, you know, inflation is quote unquote out of control, versus the employment article you read that, you know, historically speaking, we're at, you know, as low as we have been, you know, in
So I
decades.
should stop holding my breath.
What's that?
So I should stop holding my breath.
I think so, yeah, and that's not healthy anyway, but yes.
Steve?
So Francie, if you quit reading the New York Times, the news gets way better quickly then. But if
Yeah,
you
I'll
look
go to
at,
Fox,
if
no
you look
worries.
at things out of control of the U.S., like what's happening between China and Taiwan, what's happening between Putin and Ukraine,
yeah.
what is North Korea doing,
Yeah.
climate change pressures,
Sure.
all of these things are happening
Yeah.
that affect what the economy does that are not in our control. And I think that's where a lot of the pessimism maybe comes from in, you know, in
Exactly.
some predictions on
That's
what's
right.
going to happen.
I mean, we both sit on the Economic and Market Analysis Committee meeting, or committee, I should say. And in our weekly meetings, either I co-chair it or Bill co-chairs it, Bill Dennehy, another CIO at our firm. And we typically go through all the economic data, like, for example, that we're presenting right now. Julie actually writes up most of the information that you're reading here. And in the middle of our agenda, we have the items that you're bringing up. You know, the debt ceiling. That was and still is. I mean, in fact,
Question.
Yeah.
I think
Anything
they're
happened
shaking
yet?
hands as we speak. Yes.
Yeah.
Biden,
not
maybe,
shaking hands
hopefully
as
they're
we
shaking
speak.
hands as we speak. Yeah.
Throwing
Yeah.
things at each other.
Kevin McCarthy and Biden, hopefully they make
I'm
some
okay if they don't
progress today.
shake hands as long as my side wins.
Yeah, exactly. So that's an agenda item. How can it affect our management of your portfolio? The Chinese, Taiwan situation, some of them, you know, quote unquote, black swan events, very unlikely to happen, but still could affect the situation. And what's ironic, so it's so unique about our circumstance with the debt ceiling is, you know, we're seeing an elevated level of yields for the time periods that are most likely to be affected by this negotiation. And hopefully they don't get to a point where they get too close to the cliff and they drop off and we, you know, default in any way, shape, or form. Let's hope that that doesn't happen. But there's certainly stress being created right now, being reflected in those higher yield levels because of the risk involved. But ironically enough, and we saw this back in 2011, outside of that time period, we're still the world's, you know, go-to relative to flight to quality. So the irony there is, okay, they're going to get this fixed, and we might see, you know, a credit crisis. We're going to see a jump into treasuries outside of that range. And so, you know, you would see interest rates drop, most likely, if we get to that point. But it's a unique situation, and we have a unique circumstance in Washington relative to some of those events that you mentioned. But I don't know if you
Can
wanted
I
to add
ask,
to
what
that.
is a black swan event?
I'm sorry, yeah, it's a black swan is a rare, like you see
They
white
were
swans
the
everywhere.
mascot at my university, black
So-
swans.
Oh, really?
No, it's
University of
so
Valerino.
see white swans all the time. Black swan is very rare.
Yeah,
So
we had them on our pond at the
that's
university.
there you go.
And they were very rare.
Yeah, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the correlation there in terms of
Interesting.
a quote unquote
They were
black
also
swan
very
event.
messy.
Yeah,
I'm sure you're going to.
I'm not going to go there. That would be a hard right turn in economic presentation.
I'm sure you're going to be prognostic in a minute, but so given that there's more contracting than expanding right now in the economy, I'm sure you're getting there. I probably shouldn't even ask this, but that's going to affect how you handle our investments.
Yes.
Go more conservative.
No, because what typically happens, and Julie will go over the portfolio, is when you see, let's say, for example, that we do go into recession next year, and I haven't got to what the marketplace versus the Federal Reserve thinks is the appropriate path for monetary policy yet. But jumping ahead, let's say that we do see a recession and the Fed has to react relative to economic circumstances, and they lower the overnight rate. So historically speaking, we're going to see the longer end of the curve. So let's just define it by, for your purposes, 2 to the 5 year part of the curve. Likely that will react before the Fed even moves rates lower. So we want to, and we're in the process of building the foundation in your portfolio with these higher yields to perform in that type of environment, both with the yield component as well as something called total return. The change in the underlying price of that security would be reflected in the total return that Julie's going to go over in a moment. So we want to stay disciplined in this environment. That is crucial that we do that, and we're trying to do that. And every time, Julie calls in or I call her, then we're sometimes having that discussion relative to where we want to place the securities on the curve. But I'm kind of jumping into what Julie's going to cover. But so that's, a crystal ball, if you will, and my crystal ball and everyone's is actually pretty blurry. So we'll see what happens. It's humbling, the marketplace, when you've been doing it for 35 years. The first
Sure.
3.5 months of your career, you think you know everything, but you'll learn quickly you don't.
Thank you. Yeah, Greg.
I still think about whiplash from the pandemic, and I think a lot of the things, I think some of the things I'll say that we see here are a result of these aberrations are caused by, scarcity and shortages and supply chain issues and all these things that came out of the pandemic. So it's like we're still in a whiplash. Does that enter into when you're trying to look at all these things, is that still considered? Are people still talking about that? Because I can't help but think we're expecting the pandemic is pretty much considered over, in its form. We're all used to having this, so things are going to return to some sort of stability. And I'm just wondering if that's part of the conversation, because we could see these indicators changing based on that. The variances declining, the whatever, I'm thinking of the shapes of the curves could just become much less unpredictable the longer we get away from the pandemic ending and all those things happening. I'm just wondering, so it seems to me that things are still going to keep changing, and it's going to still be unpredictable, but we might be able to get a sense that it might be calming a bit. And this strange thing about the employment versus everything else, the indicators just aren't making sense as they ever did.
Right, exactly. And one thing that comes to mind with what you're stating is the supply chain issues and the challenges we had there. We're seeing in most cases, certainly not all, most cases the supply chain issues are easing up significantly and have, some even back to normal pre-pandemic levels, but there's still challenges with some. We were in a presentation in a large utility and their transformer orders.
Right.
And those are still...
You can't get them.
Can't get them, exactly. Right. So there's pockets that are still challenged, exactly what you're talking about.
Well, can I just tag on to that? Well, and the problem I'm seeing with the supply chain issue, and the prices went up because the demand was high, you couldn't get them. And you keep wondering now that, that's kind of resolving itself, are the prices going to come down? Prices at restaurants went up because it was hard for them to get food, especially meat products. And all those prices went up in this community significantly. And now that the restaurateurs are saying, well, we're charging $25 for a burger, you don't even get fries with that. Why would we come back down again?
Yeah, coming back down is probably unlikely. So you have that significant call it an inflation shock, if you will, and rates come up, okay, that hamburger goes from whatever, $4 to $6, and here it's plugging
that'd be a
along, and they
deal.
can't, the price elasticity, they keep it, supply chain issues at $6. Well, as we go through time, in that first inflation slide, you're measuring it 12 months before, so you have that huge increase. They're not going to probably go back to $4.50.
Yeah, and
So
here
it's
the
gonna stay
restaurateur's
there.
making a greater profit, and hopefully, we would hope in this community that he's turning that back into maintaining his staff,
Mm-hmm.
providing benefits, providing security, job security issues. I'm not sure we're gonna
Right.
see that. Wishful thinking again on my part, but, it's a kind of a fairness thing. We understood it when you needed to go up in price to cover your cost, and do you understand it now that we can't afford it anymore?
Right, right, yeah, and there's gonna be a time period, probably over the next few years relative to where the equilibrium is.
Yeah, that balance.
Maybe they raise that price $6.05, and then it's reflected in that chart, and it looks like, wow, things are great. It's only 2% inflation,
Yeah.
because
But-
you've got that baseline of that
Right.
$6 burger, if you will.
Right,
It's only gone up to 5 cents.
such a deal.
So, yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thanks, Greg, for bringing that up.
And then on the following page, so we've got the Federal Reserve here, and we've got the balance sheet on the left-hand side. We have the effective federal funds rate on the right-hand side. You can see it hit almost $9 trillion, and they were carving out about $95 billion a month out of that balance until we saw the recent banking crisis and put in some facilities relative to meeting some liquidity issues that some of the banks that we are aware of, SVB and Signature, just naming two, had, and some stress that still exists, but they're back on path forward relative to approximately $95 billion a month reduction in that balance sheet. And then probably more importantly, at least right now, over the past week, we saw the effective federal funds rate move up another 25 basis points to a range of 5 to 5.25. And as I stated again in the opening statement, we think that it's likely, we're data dependent, just like the Fed in terms of our opinion, but it's likely they could pause here and remain at what they define as a sufficiently restrictive level and affect what we're talking about today in terms of the deceleration of inflation. And they certainly don't want to put or have a hard landing, if you will, and put the U.S. Economy into a recession. But a soft landing is their goal, but that has been very difficult to achieve historically speaking. So we will see what it looks like as we move forward. And then finally, what all this means relative to bond yields. You can see on the left-hand side, we've got the 2-year, 5-year, and 10-year treasuries. Currently, or at least about an hour ago, the 2-year was trading at a 405. The 5s were at a 351, and the 10-year was at a 352. And then on the right-hand side, that's just a depiction of the U.S. Treasury curve. And you've got it both with the dotted lines, April of 2022, a year ago, and April of 2023. That dark green line is approximately where we're at right now. And I had mentioned the diversion between the Fed's projection of where appropriate levels of interest rates will be, the effective rate, both in the near term as well as long term. There are summary of economic projections. And where the market thinks the appropriate level or where the level will be. And when I looked at something called futures contracts, the market thinks that the appropriate level for the overnight rate, remember it's 5 to 5.25 right now, just less than a year from now, or January of 2024, is the implied rate is 4.21%. So essentially essentially 100 basis points of cuts between now and then. What was also eye-popping, and we don't agree with it, but the July contract, the futures contract, is showing a cut as well. In fact, 38% probability of a Fed cut by July. It's only a few months away. We do not believe that that's likely to occur. We do think the Fed is going to raise to a certain level, that could be the level they're at right now, and be on hold for a long period of time. So that's what we're thinking. All that makes sense, or anybody have any questions? Be happy to answer.
Francie's got something, I can see that look.
Yeah,
on it.
it's
Yeah.
just the rate. It just seems so punitive to so many segments of the economy that I don't really understand why it's prescriptive.
Relative to the Fed side of
Yeah, why they would keep raising rates when it hurts so many people, and why is that the prescription for improving the economy?
their focus, not sole focus, but their focus and the item at the top of the list is inflation. So as long as that number is as elevated as it is, they deem it appropriate relative to what they just did in terms of tightening conditions. Because they don't want to get, if you will, behind the eight ball relative to getting in front of inflation, if you will, because they already made that mistake on the other side of this with how long they kept basically, 0 to 25 basis points.
But if the price of things is going up, which is what inflation is, right? Everything costs more money, and your interest rate is going up, then you're pretty much going to stop spending, right?
Well, that's you
the hope.
just
goal.
yeah, that is the goal.
The goal is
Exactly.
then that'll bring
I
inflation
just
down and not
don't
cause
see
us to
why
go to
that's healthy.
recession.
I just have
And
a
they're-
really hard time.
Sure, yeah, and they're
It's-
trying to do it in a manner, their goal anyway, a manner to provide a quote-unquote soft landing, not a recession, just a slowdown in economic growth. That has historically been very difficult to achieve. One could argue they did it in 94, 84, depending on which economist you talk to, but since about 1961 and all the tightening cycles, 2. That's not a really good track record. So we'll see if they achieve it this time. Again, history has shown that that's been difficult to achieve. And in fact, a journalist in the latest press conference that Jay Powell had after the meeting posed the question relative to referencing what I just stated in terms of their track record and history. And Jay Powell acknowledged that it hasn't been the best of track records, if you will.
So we're going to keep punishing the consumer even though it doesn't work.
Well, that's not, economic theory would say that will work eventually. And
They just
The
keep
theory,
punishing.
but in reality it doesn't. But the theory says it should, so we'll just keep doing it.
You've heard the common phrase that the beatings will continue until morale improves.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
perfect.
Kind of what it is, exactly.
Isn't the consumer getting punished by paying more for for less value, or paying so much
Yes.
more comparatively than they did for the same good in the
Definitely.
recent past?
And then paying more interest on top, yeah,
Definitely,
it's
but
like
it's just not conclusive that raising the interest rate is gonna cure inflation. So, it's like a double whammy for the consumer.
So in other words, they should be talking to us.
Yeah, Paul Volcker had a much harder situation relative to the inflation picture back in the late 70s and early 80s, and he had to raise rates to unprecedented levels at that point in time. And luckily, we're not in that situation.
Yeah.
But eventually, even that provided the solution, if you will, to inflationary pressures. And again, that's the issue that faces the Fed right now. And again, they're considering numerous factors, but I would consider that what they're looking at is inflation as the number one factor relative to setting monetary policy.
Thank you.
All right.
Now the fun part.
All right, well, what does all of this mean for the county's portfolio? So let's take a look. Always like to start with a review of the objectives. Safety of principal first and foremost, liquidity, and then followed by a commensurate rate of return. And the objective will be measured vis-a-vis a market benchmark index, which is the 1 to 3 year index. And the strategy is to invest in those high-quality fixed income instruments that are permitted by the county's investment policy and by Colorado revised statutes. And if we go to the next page, we can see our latest compliance report. And we do check compliance before and after every trade and then report that back to you. So you can see everything in the portfolio is in compliance. The one asterisk is some inherited securities that were mortgages that were purchased many years ago before we had this policy and started managing this portfolio. And if we go to the next page, we can take a look. This is a good summary, I think, of the portfolio characteristics, and I'll focus on the middle column, which is as of the end of March. So you can see the average maturity, about 1.7 years, and average modified duration, 1.6 years. You can see the duration is a little bit short of the benchmark at 1.76 years. This was by design, as we were in a very rapidly rising rate environment. This is a defensive position to be in because this is a way to manage market risk, if you will. As we're nearing the end, we believe, of the Fed rate hikes, should see more stability in short rates and possibly a decline in short rates moving forward. We will seek to move this to about neutral with the benchmark to capture those gains as rates begin to fall. So that's the strategy there. Your average purchase yield, you can see, has continued to rise to a 151 as of the end of March. So this encompasses what the securities were bought at that still exist in the portfolio. So this has some older securities that might be 3 years old, for example, that were bought at lower purchase yield. And as soon as those mature off and we're reinvesting in today's yields of, let's call it 4%, give or take, that continues to rise on average. The market yield on average at a 429, you can see that is significantly higher. If we replaced the entire portfolio on March 31st, that would have been the average market yield. And in terms of quality, the U.S. government right now is rated AA plus AAA, same as the portfolio, and approximately $74 million invested in this managed portfolio. That does not include the liquidity that the county maintains separate from this portfolio. So taking a look at the next page, we can look at more detail here. You can see the portfolios distributed.
Sorry, Kelly has a
Where did
question.
the extra
Sorry.
4 million come from?
I'm sorry?
Where did the extra 4 million come from
Extra
from
4
last
million.
year to?
There were some market gains over the quarter because we had this rapid, huge magnitude of rate increases throughout 2022. Rates actually moderated a little bit in the first quarter, particularly in March with the banking crisis. We had a flight to quality into U.S. Treasuries. Rates came down. When rates come down, the prices of what you already own rise. So those are actually unrealized gains just based on rates coming down.
Okay, thank you.
And taking a look at the distribution here, you can see you're distributed between 0 and 5 years, largest concentration between 1 and 2 and 2 and 3 years. The light gray portion of the bar are your U.S. Treasuries. The dark green are your agencies. And that little cream colored portion is a World Bank bond, which is a AAA rated supranational, and a little bit of cash, just a month-end maturity that got invested the following week. And then a little bit different view on page 18 here. We can see vis-a-vis our 1 to 3 year Treasury Agency Index. The portfolio is represented by the dark green bars. You can see we are more distributed across the curve than the index. So we have more liquidity on the short end, which is really helpful in this high rate environment, reinvesting pretty frequently in those higher rate instruments. But then we also are a little bit of a barbell is what we call it. We have more in that 3 to 5 year sector than the index. Because when rates start coming down, and inevitably they will, we're going to be really happy to have locked in some of today's yields for a little bit longer period. So that is by design. And then on the next page here, we can see not a big change in the allocation quarter to quarter. You can see about 60% of the portfolio is in U.S. Treasuries, about 35% in our federal agencies, and then we've got a 2% position in World Bank and the money market fund that has been invested since. And a very, very small amount in those CMOs, those mortgages. And the duration across the bottom there. We try to stay very consistent relative to the benchmark in a very narrow band, a little bit short, as I mentioned, throughout our rising rate environment. You'll start to see these bars come back up to the neutral line over the coming months as we feel that we are near the end of that rate hiking cycle. And on the next page, we can see that the portfolio is very well diversified between our government issuers, your U.S. Treasuries, your various government agencies, again, your supranational bond, and your mortgages, which are all federal government agency mortgages at very small allocations there. And on the next page, again, this is S&P ratings. So S&P rates the U.S. government AA+. So almost everything here is in that AA category. AAA, you have your World Bank bond and a couple of other bonds that have a AAA rating by S&P. And the investment performance over various periods of time. So this is total return, as Scott mentioned earlier. So this includes two primary components. So this is the interest income generation of the portfolio. So those bond yields or rates that you're getting on your investments. It also includes your mark-to-market or fair market value changes in the prices of those securities. If you owned a bond as a fixed income investor in 2022, you had a loss, a fair value loss. Your price went down because when rates go up as rapidly as they did, the price of what you already own, it's worth less when rates move up that quickly. So that had an impact here. You can see the negative performance in the 2 and 3 year. But you can also see we're less negative than the index. So any fixed income investor had unrealized losses. We have not sold anything at a loss. You still get your principal and interest at the end of the day. This is an accounting situation, essentially. But you can see it's already started to turn around in the latest 12-month period and the latest 3-month period. And that's because rates have moderated. And we've reinvested so much at higher rates that tends to generate the higher performance or better performance over the long run. So we do expect over the long run we'll continue to have positive and commensurate performance higher than the benchmark. So I know that's a lot to understand. If we just want to think about the interest income component, this is the chart to look at. This is your average purchase yield, about a 151. And again, we'll continue to see the trajectory of this curve rise as we have older securities that are very low rate roll off and reinvesting at these 4%-ish yields. Yes.
Is that interest dependent on the value of the bonds? Like, when you say the value goes down, does
It
the
is
interest-
not.
Does not, okay.
It is not. So if we buy a 4% coupon on a U.S. Treasury, that's the interest. That's
Of
going
the
to-
face value, of the original face value of the bond?
Correct. Correct.
you.
That price component is not reflected in this.
Great, thanks.
Good question. Any other questions on this part of the portfolio? All right. Well, Ann, jump in if you'd like. The county does maintain significant liquidity away from our managed securities portfolio, about $94 million almost at the end of March, and this is in the local government investment pools, which are yielding about 5%.
And I would add that that represents a large amount of funds that we're holding in trust for other municipalities or districts that we collect in property tax. That has all been distributed, so very little of it still exists. We wouldn't normally hold that much in these local government investment pools, but they're just the liquid side of our portfolio that we manage as property tax rolls in.
Do we hold the yield on their behalf?
I'm sorry?
Do we hold the interest on their behalf?
We do.
And do we keep it or do we give it to
We
them?
keep it.
Part of our investment strategy.
5% is pretty high compared to
It is.
most of our stuff, which
It
is
is,
really
well,
low.
it tracks with the Fed funds rate. So it's a very short liquidity pool. It's day-to-day liquidity, and it tracks with Fed funds. So it goes up when the Fed raises rates, and it comes down just as quickly.
I see.
Yes, exactly. But it's nice to have for now. So we can.
That's the flip side of the doomsday thing.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So we can skip to the consolidated on page 28, I think. And this is just a snapshot of the entire portfolio. So this is the liquidity plus the managed portion of the portfolio, just under 168 million, and AAA rated overall. So a very healthy position, I would say. I'm happy to address any additional questions.
You know, I have a question. This gets to be so much more understandable every time you come before us. And I'm not sure why, but I thank you.
It's our pleasure.
And how many years is this,
I
Patty?
know. You got 3 more years to go at it, guys, here, so.
Could I go back to, you skipped page 25, just as I was baffled by it.
Oh, sure, sorry.
Donuts.
Donuts. Yeah.
What is this telling us?
This is telling us donuts are delicious. No, this is
like
just
an eye test.
This is telling us all of the county's liquidity is invested in local government investment pools. So some people keep a portion in a bank account, for example, or a money market fund.
All right.
And we have several pools that are AAA rated here in the state of Colorado. So I know Ann uses several of them. But that's all this tells you.
Okay.
When I first looked at it, I thought it said supernaturals.
I get a lot of
I thought,
questions on
boy,
that.
we are really going out there.
And that's what the consolidated portfolio looks like, so about half in cash. Any other questions?
With the bank failures and
Oh, yeah.
nearby bank failures, does that affect our portfolio at all, given where we have the money invested?
You know, that's a great question. You don't own any corporate bonds, so you don't own any bonds that are debt instruments of banks, for example, a Charles Schwab or a JP Morgan or a US Bank, like some of our clients do. So you're not exposed at all to bank credit from that standpoint. In the state of Colorado, as in most states, any deposits that you would have at a bank must be collateralized over and above the FDIC, 250,000. So that's backed by FDIC. Anything over and above has to be collateralized under the Public Deposit Protection Act with treasuries and agencies, basically. So I know Ann's had some conversations with your banks. I'll let you elaborate.
And I think I sent you an email perhaps a month or 6 weeks ago detailing each of our investments and assets and how they were covered. But yes, I mean, I've looked at the Vectra Bank is our bank where we keep our operating account, and they have a report that they're required to submit to the state. I think it's is it every day or every week? But just demonstrating for Pitkin County what level we're collateralized at. And I think the last one I looked at was like 146%, which is significantly higher than they're required to do. So I believe we're in good shape in terms of protection from any banking crises that might go on.
Can I just real quick?
Yeah, of
The
course.
250,000, which is FDIC, how does that get increased or decreased? Because it seems, in today's dollars, it seems really low.
They're talking about that right now. I think the last time it was increased was Great Financial Crisis, if I'm not mistaken, 2009, 2008.
Yeah.
It's something that's being discussed by the regulators right now, possibly doubling that because of what's happened at some of these regional banks.
Right,
So,
right. I mean, not that I'm definitely at that concern level. It was just interesting when that number.
Right.
I never realized. I thought all your money was, but it's not.
They don't change it very often, but it is something that's being discussed right
So
now.
if you split your monies up and have them protected in 4 different banks, then I think that's what we just did with Northwest COG funds, to make sure that we were in light of what was happening around the country.
I think diversification is
Yeah,
wise in this
yeah.
environment.
'Cause I know I had to sign a bazillion more documents with 4 different banks, so.
Any other
Good
questions?
stuff.
All right.
All right, well, thank you all so much.
Thank you, guys.
It's always a joy to
Nice
be
to see
here.
you.
Really
Let me know where I
appreciate
get
you
that
indulging
$6
me.
burger.
No worries.
See,
What's that?
that's,
Let us know
The
where we can get that
$6
$6 hamburger.
you need an In-N-Out burger here.
I just went to the one in Park Meadows.
Next year.
Yeah, good luck.
You could actually,
The
you
thing
could
is,
just bring
consumers,
a
if we
carload
stop,
up
we
here
just
and
say
sell them
no
on the
and stop.
street and pay for your
I know,
trip.
I know, it's
Has to
very
come down.
difficult.
Reality, we have burgers here on, you know, just go, hey, this was, you know, price X.
And this is the Aspen price, right?
And then In-N-Out Burger still is better for $6 and you get fries. Thanks, guys. Nice-
There'll be a
nice
test
to
on this
see you.
later.
Nice to see you in 3D.
Thank you all.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for traveling.
Our pleasure.
Okay, we have a big topic in front of us. How to redistrict. So we have Ingrid, and is Clint here? No.
Not yet.
Hi, Rye.
Oh, convenient for
Are
him.
we early? No.
No, we're actually a wee bit behind. All right, give us those maps.
Yeah. So
I'll just slide them
I just
around.
printed out all of the maps again.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ingrid. And I want the board to know I appreciate your letting me be part of this discussion. And I did meet with Rye for some clarification prior to today's meeting.
There you go, Kelly.
Thank you.
One for you.
Is the top one yours, Steve? Thanks for sending that, by the way. I really appreciated that. Anytime you guys are ready.
Well, yeah. Well, just from the map packet that you just received, so from the last work session, you were presented the top map just kind of shows the realignment based off of the 2020 census blocks. The following pages are option 1, 2, and 3. And then on the last page, you will see option 4, which is newly presented today.
And this is the option that one of your members, that Steve, came up with.
Number
So
four,
that's-
number 4, is that the
Yes.
one? Okay,
That's number 4, yeah.
Right.
got it.
So, work with Lauren, get it drawn up.
What did the red lines on the top one mean?
On option 4?
No, on the top page.
On top.
Oh, so that just represents what the BOCC districts looked like prior to the 2020 census blocks.
But the red lines?
Yeah, so the red line, and I don't have that map in front of me, but it basically just represents what they were before, and then we had to realign the districts based off of the 2020 census blocks. So the red line shows what was previous, the black lines show the realignment to the 2020 census blocks. And that was done so that we could adequately capture the population using the census blocks, because that's part of the Colorado statute. And without.
I thought these maps were a consideration of how we're going to adjust it, but now you're saying this is how we've already adjusted it?
The top one, according to they put together some blocks and changed them into one, as I understand it, so that's what happened.
Yeah, effectively, because we're using the 2020 census blocks to determine what the population is in each district, we use that realignment for the population calculation. Because if you have a census block that is bisected, based off of the current districts, it's really hard to determine where that population actually falls. So again, this was just a cleaner way to actually calculate the population with good faith.
I just
Okay.
have a quick question before we get too
Yeah.
in-depth into this. Whomever did the noticing for today's meeting, was this noticed as a meeting of the redistricting commission, or was it, this is a BOCC work session, or how is it noticed? Does anybody have the answer to that for me?
I think it was just noticed as a
Double
BOCC
check.
work
I
session.
believe this is a BOCC work session, and then we have an item on tomorrow's agenda for the regular meeting.
Okay.
But it's not
So
noticed.
I would suggest we can probably answer some limited questions about the procedure we're in at this point. But as far as getting into the in-depth conversation about the actual commissioner districts as they're being proposed and the 4 options, I think that conversation needs to be had at a
Especially-
noticed meeting of the redistricting commission, which my understanding based on what I just heard right now, this is not that.
The decision has to be, certainly
I think
has
the
to be.
overall
conversation
conversation
has
about
to be.
the actual redistricting, the substance of the redistricting options in front of you right now needs to be had at a noticed meeting of the redistricting commission.
Wow.
Now, again, I think we can briefly go over procedure and answer a couple questions about where we are in the procedure, but as far as a substantive discussion about the mapping itself and redistricting the county, I think that needs to happen tomorrow.
Okay.
So,
But
just been,
So we can get to know the maps today and understand the
you can
process.
all look at them as if they'd been distributed at the last meeting, which they were, of the redistricting commission, but from what I understand today is not a meeting of the redistricting commission, but I don't have the notice in front of me right now. So
I'm confused then because I had thought when we met last time that when you brought a resolution forward to a regular meeting, it was going to be with one of these options. So if we can't discuss that today, how do you make a resolution with one of these options?
So we were at, or at least the last time that I was here, it was a special meeting of the Board of County Commissioners sitting as the redistricting commission. My understanding is that is not how today is noticed, and that this is a BOCC work session. I think from a procedural standpoint, as I said, I can answer a couple questions, but as far as preparing a resolution or considering the substance of the redistricting plans, that needs to take place at a noticed meeting of the redistricting commission, which isn't happening until tomorrow, from what
it's
I
not
understand.
noticed as a special district meeting.
Correct. That's what I.
Tomorrow
that's what-
either.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow,
Okay, then we should
just a
fix
regular
that too.
BOCC meeting.
So,
We have
so
to
we
put it
won't
off
see a
week.
resolution tomorrow. If we can't discuss this today, how are they gonna bring a resolution forward?
Well, at the last meeting, you said bring it
Option one,
for
if-
option, but it might change.
Uh-huh.
So that's still what I understand
What you're
right
operating.
now, nothing, yes.
So the resolution tomorrow will be about option 1, and then we can change it?
Well, the redistricting commission could not take any action tomorrow because you have to consider all 3 options at 3
Or,
noticed public hearings on the redistricting mapping. And my understanding is the last special meeting was 1. Tomorrow would be 2. We can adjust the noticing if we need to. And we would have to have a 3rd redistricting meeting, public hearing, before the redistricting commission can make a decision on adopting a redistricting plan.
so then at tomorrow's meeting, then, we could give Ingrid direction to write the resolution for 4, or for 2, or for something else. Right? We could give her direction tomorrow?
If it's
And then she
proper-
would come back, and that would be we would make the decision then. Yeah, Patty?
I suggest we notice it right now, because it's already, that clock is wrong. And we will be getting to that item on our agenda tomorrow. We need to have 24 hours notice, I believe. So we need to renotice that like right now, if we want to discuss it tomorrow's meeting.
Trying to get hold of folks.
Okay, as a special board. So the second question really quickly is, so what do we do today?
I have a related question on noticing.
Yeah, go
That's
ahead.
okay. You might want to go back and look at the 18th and see if that was noticed properly. It's noticed as a special meeting,
Yeah.
but not of
As a
any
meeting of the
board.
redistricting
It
commission.
was,
Yeah.
no, it was noticed as a special meeting of the Board of County Commissioners with the intent of being able to adopt option one, I
It just says
believe.
special meeting, first reading, public hearing, discussion of upcoming resolution of BOCC to revise, establish commissioner district boundaries.
So we're
So I
at
don't know
zero.
what you need us to cover.
If that's the case, I mean, so the board of county commissioners appoints itself as the redistricting commission and then sits as the redistricting commission, similar to when you all sit as the ambulance district board or things like
Or the
that.
Board of
So the
Social
meeting,
Services.
the meeting notice needs to reflect that you are sitting as the redistricting commission.
And it doesn't reflect that.
And I don't know, I haven't seen the notice for the 18th, but to the extent that that's the case, we need to do 3 public hearings of the redistricting commission. So if we need a if we need a renotice tomorrow, we can do that. We still have time to do that 24 hours in advance, and then hold
clock is wrong.
2 subsequent, yeah, that is about 2 hours off. Then hold 2 subsequent meetings of the redistricting commission to solicit public comment at a public hearing on the proposed plans.
So this language doesn't work. Resolution of the Board of County Commissioners to review and establish commissioner district boundaries? That doesn't mean we're acting?
I don't think so. I think it would be a lot cleaner, and frankly, noticing is one of the easiest things to get government action overturned on if it's not done properly. So it would be best if it said a special meeting of the redistricting commission or just a meeting of the redistricting commission.
And I would suggest we put it at the end of the agenda, because that'll definitely give us time to notice it today.
If what?
For
We'll put it
tomorrow.
at the end of tomorrow's agenda, with that, because we'll probably be here at
After
7
land
o'clock. It
use?
gives us plenty of time.
Just so long as it's after 2:15 or whatever.
Well, our meeting tomorrow is very long.
I have
Yeah.
We're gonna have
a
to all wait.
question. We did have notice that went out to the public before that 18th meeting, but then I don't know if the meeting itself was,
I don't either.
Posted
I
Well,
haven't-
they just
correctly.
read you the notice, and it
Yeah,
wasn't noticed
yeah,
as a
so,
special,
yeah.
specific to the
yeah.
redistricting.
There was noticing to the public that there was gonna, that first meeting on the
Has to be on.
18th, but yes, they didn't match. Yeah.
So we should fix that. Sorry.
That's okay, let's get it right. I'd rather do it right and slow it down than do it
If we
wrong.
did it wrong and someone
yours.
could challenge us in court or something over it, then we're better off spending a little bit, one more meeting at this point.
Just got to get it done by September 30 of this year, so I think we have time to do that, even if we need to
We can do a s-
renotice.
We can do a special meeting at work sessions if we need to, so.
That is true.
Except
Okay.
for you all will
So,
need to pull
John,
ballots for
tomorrow-
elections.
That's, yes, that was what I was thinking
Tomorrow,
about just now.
We should probably move it to the end of the day,
The,
So we'll
um,
notice it at the end of the day for tomorrow?
just to make sure that we're in compliance.
Let me just ask the question, because I think part of the conversation today, to have work session time was, to review the options, the recommendation. I believe one of the 5 of you may have some alternatives, that you wanted to present. Steve, I don't know if that's the case to call you out on that, but, if that's the case, I wonder if we want to punt on both of these right now, given that you have until September, renotice the work session time and the regular meeting time.
And not have it on at all for tomorrow.
Because tomorrow will turn into more of a work
Yeah.
session item, and you'll probably spend a lot of time, which is fine if the board wants to do that, but it may be more appropriate in a work session before you get into public hearing, particularly if you're going to make changes. So I just want to throw that out there.
I
before
think we
we
need to be
renotice.
clean. Yeah.
To Kelly's point, though, September 30th would be very tough for elections because we have things that have to be
We'll
turned
get it
into the
done
state
before
before
then.
then.
First week of
I think all
August, it'll be
summer
done,
to do it.
and I'm in
Cool.
Scotland.
Thank you.
So we do have plenty of time. I have a one-page sheet of the reasons that, points about my option number 4, but I shouldn't present them today. It should be in a redistricting committee
Good night.
meeting.
I mean, I would suggest you submit it for the packet so that the public can see it too.
And we could do that, to have
Yeah.
my one pager be sent out to everybody in
And
the
I'll
packet.
keep these.
Okay, so let's do that, let's reschedule both.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Sorry I
guys.
didn't
Nice
notice
to
that
see
sooner.
you all.
Thanks, sooner.
Thanks, Rye.
Just brought us back up to schedule.
So now we're ahead of time. You were looking for, we're ahead of
You're
schedule.
just into conundrums today, Rye.
Yeah.
It's a little salty today.
All right, ladies.
You're a little salty.
Thank you, thank you.
Me?
Thank you.
Getting these little
Okay.
comments.
That made
every
that seem
night.
And
way
in
for
just
granted.
a minute, Frank.
That's
You're
really
reading
got
too
you
much
all
into it.
Now I'm really confused.
Okay,
This would be a
That's
record.
good.
We're
Well-
only 11 minutes into the meeting.
but
We-
now we're supposed to have people come in, and I'm sure
John, we
they're not
need to
ready.
reset the clock behind you too.
Okay, let me do
Yeah,
only
just
two
like-
things at a
agendas
time.
or
I'll
meeting
screw the
discussion.
third one up.
That's a satellite clock. Something's going
All
on.
right, so I don't know where we,
So, well, we can go ahead and take a break now, because we're gonna have to wait for all our interviewees anyway.
are we?
Could I bring up an open discussion item? We can always come back to it later.
We could do
Future
open
agendas
discussion.
and open discussion, and then if none of them are in at that point, we can do our break.
I'm okay with that. Everybody okay with not taking a break now?
Yeah, I may take a break anyway, but you guys can go on and talk, but I'm
Okay,
good for.
let's do review of future agendas. That's usually the quickest. But John, are you too busy to do that right
Give
now?
He's
me
busy.
just a minute
Well,
to
while
work
he's-
on tomorrow's future
All right, we'll,
agenda,
we'll
but if you
do
wanna.
board open
Yeah.
discussion first.
Okay, can
Reg.
I just put all these on your paper. The Forest Service is
Yes.
soliciting comments on the Coal Basin, which has been revised. The Coal Basin Plan has been revised, and this is the letter where they're soliciting comment. I went to the Coal Basin meeting in Carbondale last night, the presentation, which was very good. Chris Kasky and Mona were there, and Kevin Warner was there, and another forester, as well as some of our public health people. Kurt was there, and Tom Dunlop was there, and many other interested people. It was well attended. What's happening is the new proposal for Coal Basin is to just do aerials only for the most part, and then only horseback or hiking-based, ground-based surveys in Coal Basin, because there was an issue with locals about disturbing the roadway, the road base up into Coal Basin. So they just thought, rather than get in a fight about it, we'll use horses and we'll use aerials, drones and helicopters, and that's how we're gonna do it.
Good idea.
And yeah, it's a compromise that seems to be working, and they're back on track. So they've had this comment period for the conditional approval, or whatever it's called, from the Forest Service, and they're looking for comments. Kurt asked me, from our public health, asked me if the county has comments, should we be, the separate departments all be commenting separately, or should the county have a consolidated, what's the process for making a comment on something like this? And I proposed that the county get its ducks coordinated in a row with a single comment package, rather than public health saying one thing and environmental saying somebody else, and, rather than multiple different voices from the county, let's try to consolidate and have one voice. And so I thought I would share the letter with you, and we could discuss that at some point.
But we're not the entire county if you want public health to weigh in, and, I mean,
Well, if Public Works, for instance, has to weigh in, and then Public Health has to weigh in, and then whoever else has an interest.
so how do you suggest we solicit those?
The departments all figure out what their interest is and make a comment, which is then collated into a package, so it's submitted as one comment from Pitkin County, rather than, that's what I was gonna propose.
Yeah, I'm just wondering
But
what your
maybe- there may be a-
mechanism would be, that.
I'm here to ask, not to tell you.
So I might be able to help here. So any comments really should be, approved by the board. And so any comments should be coming from the board. If the board would like staff to review and make comments from staff's perspective for your consideration, I can ask staff to do that. We may or may not have specific concerns to bring up. But we can certainly distribute that and bring recommended comments back to the board that could be incorporated or not at the board's pleasure.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Excellent,
Okay.
thank you. Yeah, so Public Health will have some comments, Public Works may have some comments.
When are these?
This goes until, for about 30 days.
So we'll take that as direction to bring back some recommended comments to the board.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks
Had-
for sorting.
Had we, oh, sorry.
I didn't know what the process was, but that makes a lot of sense.
Question,
Kelly?
Greg? Why don't
I think
go
you
ahead?
were first.
I was thinking that for this monitoring thing, they had to, I thought they were gonna pour some concrete actually to make a, like, make a common size of exit from where the gas is leaking so they can measure it accurately. But maybe they have some other way that they don't have to pour any concrete, that they can measure the amount
I
from the
think
different locations.
this is an intermediate step where they're still trying to get a sense of what's flowing out of there. They've had estimates from the federal government and from the state, public health. So the next step they've determined is to use more non-invasive means. They're not going to pour concrete. They're not going to put in culverts in the road and reef grade the road in order to get in there. They'll just go in on foot or by horse, and for the ground issues, which would be putting up maybe a 3-day monitor, various locations. It's a portable monitors they can move around that will measure for days at a time to just get a sense of what the flow is in and out of the mine portals. In addition, they'll be doing aerials with the helicopter and aerials with the drone that will fly between 400 and 700 feet off the deck, taking pictures using a laser. They can measure the methane
Yeah, they
release.
can do dispersal in the air and
Yeah.
stuff.
So
But I agree
but the
with
thing
you, I
is,
thought so too.
the concerns were there are some voices in the public who were concerned enough to say, well, we're concerned you're going to go in and do something to the road, or you're going to affect the drainage, or so they just thought, let's back away from that. Once they get a sense of it from the aerial footage, then next year there'll be another proposal in to actually go in and do something more invasive, which could be what you're saying, plugging one hole and putting a pipe in another one.
See, I thought that was part of the plan, just to do any assessment of methane was to plug some of the oxygen
Yeah.
going in so they could get a purer count.
Right, that was the original idea, but they've revised it based on one,
Chuck Downey.
public sentiment, and then also on, new information coming. Honestly, you learn something every time you go. Like, that was new information to me, that they changed the tack, and Chris has pretty good reasons for it. So that's where they are, and this is the comment period for this specific proposal.
Right.
So I don't think there's any red flags in this, but it's our opportunity to comment as anybody else from the public could as well.
Yes.
And here's a map on the back which we could look at and I
Yeah.
could discuss briefly. That's basically a 1 mile by 5 mile
Steve has 1 mile.
section that has multiple levels of mine. So imagine 1 by 5 miles in several stories. It's amazing how big it is and complicated that is. So,
Steve, did you have another question?
Well, one more, but go ahead, Kelly.
Oh, I hadn't we already submitted comments on the past?
we probably have.
I just
There was a
wondered if that's
previous
place to start in terms of figuring out who might
seeing
be
what's there.
interested in
Well, I think
coming.
Kurt from Public Health, came up to me after and said, well, we think we probably have some comments regarding, whether air quality, water quality issues. Tom Dunlop was there. Tom Dunlop has been the one who surveyed and approved and did the permit inspections on the mine when it was in operation. He's been around long enough that he has real on-the-ground experience in there. He actually took the commissioners half a mile into the mine back in the day to go in and look at the seams and the walls and
Wow.
the fractures. I know, which I wouldn't do today. So he's a resource. So the thing is, I think the quality information is improving. So yes, we did have comments on the previous, and we could probably take those and apply them here as well.
Okay, thanks.
This is much less invasive, so
Sure.
I think that one of the concerns might have been, well, let's make sure the helicopters aren't flying during calving season or something like that. It'll be happening in the summer after calving season for instance. But it is 700 feet above the ground. It's not going to be 50 feet off the deck or anything. So I couldn't perceive an issue.
So my question is, does this part of the study involve closing off the airflow into the adit down by the lamp house?
No, this one
Which I
does-
think
yeah.
would be, if they constrict the airflow there to just a limited amount and then see how that affects.
Right. That's not part of this as far as I understand. What this will include are, they call them portable, but what they are is like gas field methane monitors, which is a 4x4 square foot solar panel with a big heavy steel thing with 2 car batteries and a little sniffer that can sniff the methane. And we talked about trying to find a smaller, like, there's probably a handheld unit somewhere. but
Canary.
It's like a canary. But anyway, they're talking about having to lug these massive things in and set them up on a tripod for 3 days at a time. And
Thanks,
he was
John.
looking for volunteers to help. And I said, not if I'm carrying car batteries up there. That's a,
Horses can carry car batteries
well,
just
horses
fine.
can, yeah, but we're looking for lesser options. But the physical thing on the ground will be a device set up for 24-hour cycles to measure day and night. So it's gathering more information. It'll be useful. The pace is slower, as you'd expect, all the time.
And do they have any sort of account on the number of places that gas is leaking now?
He thinks that they're going to find, the aerial survey is probably going to give them about 50 potential sites.
Because we only looked at the 2 when we
Right,
hiked
we only
up
saw
there.
2, but there's many more. Something can be done with others. If it's a talus slope, there's not a lot you can do, but if it's a point source, then, so there might be 50 total that they'd identify, and then they'd choose a number of those for their testing. That's what I know. It was nice, the Forest Service was there and they were enthusiastic and they were supportive of it, and it was pointed out, and I think I pointed out, that the delays in the changes of this and the delay that's come from this was not caused by the Forest Service. It wasn't a pedantic process on the part of the Forest Service. It was elsewhere. And so I wanted to make sure that was clear with Kevin in the room and the others, so they wouldn't get the blame, because people were kind of looking at the Forest Service as if, this must be something that they stalled. And it's like, no, it wasn't. So that's
Well,
it for me.
the jury took 3 hours in the case against Trump in New York,
And they found him guilty.
and they can't find him guilty because it's not criminal. They found him liable for
Liable.
a total of $5 million in damages to Eugene Carroll, and that they agreed with her that he sexually abused her, but they didn't say that he raped her, but that he did defame her. So he'll probably have more supporters now.
I just received a photo of Jackie Francis getting off the airplane in D.C. and being greeted by Senator Michael Bennet. I'm
Oh, wow.
hoping she might have put in a few words about the airport, but
Was he
yeah,
was he on the
right.
plane with her? He may have been on the plane with her.
While you're here,
Savvy.
Michael.
wishful thinking. And I have
Doesn't
a
freeze
very
me.
serious question. Kelly, did you make those yummies over there?
I sure did.
What
Please
is
help
that
yourself.
orange marmalade?
It's apricot jam,
Apricot
and it's
jam.
like an almond cookie.
Oh, is there one
They're
left?
usually the ones that make it Christmas, the Italian.
Oh, those are
But I
Ruth.
did them in Basalt Elementary colors because they have
Oh, that-
Teacher Appreciation Week.
Oh, they're really good.
Thank you. And they're gluten free for people who care about that.
What is the top layer?
Chocolate.
Oh.
And then I put sanding sugar.
You have an espresso with that?
I know, I need one.
Yeah, we have a really great Keurig machine in there.
Guess the ski
It works
company-
once a year.
The ski company donated 3 espresso machines to some worthy cause, and I
The
thought, well,
schools.
what are we, chopped liver? Well, the schools,
The
I guess the schools need it, keep those kids fired up. We could use it over here too, hint, hint.
Do we have any more board discussion today?
They didn't donate to Basalt?
Is anyone else going to the Watershed Collaborative meeting on Thursday?
I would, but I can't.
I can't.
I
Yeah,
have
we
Board of
have-
Health that day.
We have read RAFTA, and then we have our
You will be joined by staff,
12:55 meeting.
but I can't.
Okay, so I'm planning on going. I might go to the RAFTA meeting first and then go over to that. but-
Okay, great.
I had a conversation with Brian Pettit this morning about the Redstone flooding possibility and the letter from Erica. So the county has 9,000 sandbags for protecting primarily bridges and that sort of thing. And Brian was quite straightforward in saying he doesn't consider it's the government's business to protect private property from flooding. And I said, well, I'm not sure we want to make that our position. But the fire district has 1,000 sandbags that they're not trying to make really public because they don't want everybody coming and taking sandbags. They have them trying to reserve them for Redstone when and if they need them. The flooding occurs mostly at the park, and they built a dike. The county, we built a dike that's 200 yards long to protect Redstone in the past, and I think Brian was unhappy that Redstone didn't remember that and that they were complaining that we're not doing anything. So it's a 200-yard long dike that's meant to protect most of the residential area, and it starts just below the park. So if it floods, it'll probably be at the park level, although Ron at the fire district, Carbondale, Sopris, whatever that place is called, says that this fire station floods frequently. Not every year, but when we have high runoff.
Talking about the one in Redstone, because
Yeah.
it's built in the floodplain.
Yeah, so they're aware of that. But, so they have this set aside of 1,000. And so the ones in the county, Brian wants to reserve for keeping public roads open and stuff. And the high water prediction is for June 14th. It's over a week later than usual, but they're not expecting the peak runoff until June 14th, which is amazing. So I said I would go up this afternoon and have a look, but he said, you don't have to worry about that. He was going to go up himself and check it out, and I'll go up in June for sure and check out it a couple of times.
And if I could add on to that, Brian was just getting ready to leave for Redstone. I talked to him on my way in. I hit every red light, by the way, possible. So
God, it worked, you guys. We got to sing.
They knew you were coming.
But yeah, it has typically been our position that we're preparing for protecting public access and the public infrastructure. That, of course, is a board call. We probably need to ramp up staffing and such considerably during flood season if we're going to be sandbagging private property too. And so that's not something we've typically geared up to do. We've geared up to protect the public infrastructure and provide information on how folks can protect their own property. And so if the board does wish to change that, we may be a little bit late in the game right now, but that is a call that the board could make in the future.
Yeah,
Where do people get sand?
from the fire department, they have 1,000 bags
where do they get
available for
sand?
people. What?
Like, is there a local distribution?
Sandbox?
Can we
Elam,
provide
sand and
some,
gravel?
Yeah, we're
cover
providing
some cost, or provide some bags, or provide some access, or something like that?
We're providing information on where people can access them. I could pull it up here. I don't have it off the top of my head.
So can I tag on to
But there are
that?
a number of places where you can get bags and sand and such. And I'll see if I can pull it up.
Sorry, I was out of the room. This is in response to a
for
letter
one.
from Sparhawk?
At the Carbondale Firehouse, they have bags for.
Yeah,
Redstone.
but this, apparently there's a woman, woman who is in need of assistance.
Well, I don't know if that's exactly what the letter said. It said, does Pickens County expect a 76-year-old woman to take her car 5 times to Carbondale to get sand? I don't know if there's actually in existence a woman of that age who needs sandbags. It was hard to tell from the way it was written.
I cannot imagine that if you went to a fire station and you were 76 or 56 or 86, that you couldn't ask a fireman for assistance and that they wouldn't help you out.
Of course. Not to mention your neighbors
Yeah.
in Redstone. So
Because I
sandbags
think-
are heavy, though.
Yeah, I think it's hard for us then to gear up. We have so many opportunities for flooding in the county. That would be stretching our staff so thin, and where efforts need to be focused on public access and public infrastructure.
And then
Oh.
we're just gonna pull up where we have the resources
my
on our
house again.
website
That's
so
my-
people can.
I'm
Thanks,
gonna
John.
live in that house in Brush Creek.
Okay, so if you go to pitkincounty.com and then head on to departments under emergency management and then high water runoff resources, you can find all the information you need.
Thank you. Good job, Valerie.
Thank you.
You know, the co-op, that's where I buy mine. They weigh 70 pounds.
Yeah,
They're heavy.
That's right, I moved my 200-some pound husband 8 times yesterday.
Yeah, I have two fat belly I have to put in my truck to get out of there.
I'm going to Fat Billy, just to
Is there any other board?
get that $6 hamburger.
Discussion.
Well, I want to just finish that discussion. So
Okay.
we received a kind of a, I'd say a passionate letter from a Carbondale City Councilwoman, Mayor Pro Tem, Erica Sparhawk, about this issue, which, you know, she said, hey, we've got a issue here and Pickens County isn't doing anything. That was her perspective. And she said she got that information from just reading articles in the paper. She said she had not interviewed any 76-year-old women, although we assumed she had. So she sent us this letter, and it seems to be demanding of a response. And so I'm just trying to figure out what I sent her a note back, said, hey, I'm going to look into it and I'll talk to the staff. And
Ron wrote to her.
Ron wrote to her,
Yeah.
right, but that's not from
As
Pitkin
an
County.
H?
Yeah.
He's not from Pitkin County.
No.
So really was addressed to us, to you and me and county staff. So I'm just trying to figure out what the response should be and who should send it beyond my informal response to her.
Well, I think, you know, if you want staff to respond with our process and such, it's not clear that she was representing Carbondale. I'll be happy to reach out to my peer to see if that was a broader representation or a passionate letter. But we are monitoring the situation. We do have emergency plans, and the most important thing to protect life and safety is making sure that infrastructure is protected so people can move to safe places. And so that's you know, what we're focused on right now.
Right.
I'll write her. I'm happy to write her.
Okay, just wanted to thinking, okay, if you.
I mean, if you want to, it's great, but she wrote to Greg and me specifically, so I think you were on that.
Well, we
letter, too.
copied, yeah.
I got
I-
copied on.
Oh, guess who's here?
Oh, hi.
Yeah, and
Hey,
I
Valerie.
know we
Gotta
had
cover that.
folks, I
Let's
know
have Valerie.
Valerie and I think Alex, we got ahead of schedule.
Okay, I
Yeah.
wasn't sure what I was walking into, thank you.
When you're walking
We
in
were all so
Redstone
glad
flooding.
you got here, right.
We were just wrapping up on our response, you know, during mud and flood season around protecting the public infrastructure and ingress egress routes and those sorts of things that we have not traditionally sandbagged private property or those sorts of things.
Right.
Is the dike that we constructed, that must have been quite a while ago, I assume.
When we built the fire station,
How long ago was that?
it was in my first or second term in
About
office.
15 years ago, I believe.
Okay.
Scott Mattice said he's trying to call in. Is he?
Oh, maybe he's trying to get
Brian is trying to call in, you said?
Scott.
Scott, and I know,
Oh.
I think Alex was gonna try and join for this,
I'd
but I think
copied
we were
Scott
thinking
on
it was
that.
gonna happen around 3:45, so.
Well,
We're ahead of schedule.
I
Amazing
think
how.
Alex is in a meeting. He can't pop in right now, but we're planning on it at 3:45, but.
We canceled one of our items.
We could probably solve this with Scott and you all, and I think we've got a,
I think we solved it.
Yeah, we've got it figured out, but if Scott wanted to comment or something, that would be, you might want to invite him to.
I didn't see him on there.
Oh, he's not?
So,
Okay.
so we
All right.
kind of said that Francie would respond to
Sure.
Erica.
Councilwoman
Erica.
Spar, to Erica.
And I hear Alex is coming in, but it's really Public Works, and I know Brian Pettit is in Redstone
In
meeting with
Redstone now,
residents,
yeah.
but Scott Mattice, I'm hearing, is trying to get on.
Well, and then we decided that we would direct them to the beautiful website that has the information where they get sand, et cetera. And then if somebody needs assistance, the feeling is that you ask the local fireman there. I can't imagine a fireman saying no.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've done quite a bit bit of outreach. There's been a lot of articles in the paper, I'm sure that you've seen, but worked with the public information at the county, and we've been putting out press releases regularly, urging residents to prepare. I mean, we all know the ski season we had last year, and we've had the National Weather Service at our Public Safety Council, and the predictions for, and I've mentioned it in here as well, predictions for up in the Crystal were one of the highest runoff years in one of the highest seven highest runoff years in like 50 years or something. It was daunting, and just people that live up there, Rob Goodwin, the chief, Carbondale Fire, they're seeing early signs of debris flow and flooding up there now. So our messaging has been urging the public to be prepared, and the PSAs have been saying, check to make sure your flood insurance is current. Is it adequate? And if you need sandbags, now is the time. And Public Works has stated that they will protect public infrastructure so that the responders can respond and such. But we were pretty clear in articles to the paper and such that it was the private property owners' responsibility to prepare their properties. And we would be responding based on public safety needs, not there's water coming into my basement. And I've read some letters. I think that's what the people in Redstone are responding to. So as I said earlier, it's Public Works you probably really want to hear from with the sandbag debate, but I think that's where we're coming from, if you'd like to add to that.
No, I agree. I spoke with Brian Pettit and Scott Mattice earlier this morning, and I think the consensus is that, the concern of Public Works and Emergency Management in the Sheriff's Office is maintaining that continuity of operations and ensuring that our public infrastructure is intact and protecting the public infrastructure so that we can continue to provide resources and services to the public when they're in need. And it's that we have been encouraging for weeks now through public information and PSAs for the citizens of Pickens County to, whatever that looks like, to contract with a local landscaper, to to take the necessary steps to protect their private lands and private structures themselves.
And could we have an actual date on when that began, just so we know when we say weeks, is it 2 weeks or is it 4 weeks?
Public outreach?
When the outreach began for this?
The Scott Condon, I just went back and read it. His large front page article in the paper was on the 20th. So three weeks ago, and Marcy's been running PSAs at least that long. And we've put a link on the front page of the Pickens County website that links to emergency management page and information on where to get sandbags if you want to build a sandbag wall, how to do that. Just a lot of information. And you've heard me for over 10 years, just like any other natural disaster that could come our way, we urge people to take personal responsibility.
Heard that a few times.
It's a similar conversation to the wildfire evacuation conversation, and having an evacuation plan in place to know where you're going and have all your paperwork and all the documents, et cetera, that you need in the event that we send out the message.
Got it. Now, if we do have citizens who, for some reason, find themselves behind the 8 ball or distraught or maybe unable to do a physical task like sandbag walls, do we have any resources, whether it's just information or volunteer assets or anything else that we could direct them to?
I believe.
And should we have that?
Scott Mattice from Public Works just hopped on. I think he might be able to answer that better. But I believe Public Works has a list of resources and local landscapers and other entities that will provide.
That's what Brian said this morning, is
And
that
that's what we just pulled up on the website.
lots of
Which is on-
landscapers are ready and willing to help, is what
Sure.
Brian said.
It's on the website.
It's on the website.
Yes. We updated that list this spring. And also just put a plug in Carbondale Fire. We've done this every time there's a high water year. They're going to have a public meeting on the 11th, which is this Thursday? At 6:30 at the
Redstone Fire Station.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Fire station?
I'm going. I'm going to be there. So.
Yes, and I will as well.
You're a great,
I-
we're a great team.
I always talk about evacuations. I
Careful, it
don't
might
care
be
what
wet up
disaster it is, I'm talking about, be ready to
Wear your boots.
evacuate. But for flooding, evacuations are a little trickier. It might be, the messaging might be moved to higher ground, but everybody has to have a thought process about it beforehand.
Right.
So is it your estimation, Valerie, that it's really not nobody's really threatened by flooding in Redstone when it floods? It's more about just landscaping and basements and stuff?
I think that Redstone is in the floodplain, and they will definitely see flooding along the boulevard. I don't know how every single house will be impacted, but I think there's some danger up there. In my 10 years, this will probably be the biggest runoff year up there. I think everyone needs to take it very seriously and get prepared. And Carbondale Fire, they're ready and willing and able to assist, and they have put sandbags up there. I don't know the details on that. I was out of
I
town.
don't know exactly
yesterday.
where they are. I believe they've placed a pile of sand and 1,000 sandbags up there for the residents to use.
I thought they were at the Carbondale Fire Department.
They
I
might be
thought
down.
that's what Ron said, and that people can come and pick them up. Let me
I have
check
to look
that.
and see. Yeah.
I was thinking it was at the water and sand up there, but that, I just have a call into Rob now, but since he moved up the meeting, I don't have all my facts and figures straight.
Well, the other thing too is we kind of have, with a wildfire or an earthquake or a tornado or hurricane, you don't have kind of a estimated time frame. They hit, so at least, and I don't want people to think June 14th is the day, but that's kind of saying this could be the day. What doesn't mean that next
Just the
week we
peak,
couldn't
is all
have
it
a
is.
heat wave or something. So people need to know that it's, don't put it off until June 12th.
No.
Think about it today, because it could be tomorrow or it could be June 14th. But you need to be prepared ahead of time, just as if it's going to hit you like an earthquake.
Alex, you're right. Our Carbondale Fire District has purchased 1,000 sandbags, and they are being delivered to the Redstone Water and Sanitation District property tomorrow, which is today. Carbondale Fire has also paid for and arranged for a full load of sand to be delivered to the same place. This may have already happened or will be completed the next day or so. We will find out when we drop off the sandbags. And then he talks about the public meeting at 6 o'clock.
And this is coordination that we've done historically.
Do
But
they have
this
sand
is
for
what
the
he
people
asked.
at the
Yes.
fire
Yeah,
station?
I want to make sure everyone
Yeah.
understands.
Right.
And he did ask that this be kept pretty much as Redstone's information so that other places don't go and
Perfect.
do sandbags in Hollaboy.
Well, we have had that happen before. When the county was placing piles of sand for sandbags for residents to use, I remember, this is very anecdotal, but I remember a pile of sand that was placed on a pullout on Upper River Road, probably late teens, and the next morning they went to go use it and it was gone. Someone came and took all the sand. So, it's,
Wow.
yeah, so we have to, I'm not saying someone stole it, but someone saw it as an opportunity to fill their sandbags and they used it all.
Or
So
they took
it's-
it to a construction site. and-
They made sand for their new beach.
Okay, I think I have my letter figured out. Yes, Steve, for Erica.
So,
Great, thanks.
aside from Redstone, I'm thinking of Capitol Creek, and I remember the day when we could not get across, we could not go down Capitol Creek Road, because the culvert, and this is probably 50 years ago, but the culvert that where the county road crossed got plugged during high water, and the river was just going right across. It was not, you would have been washed away to your death if you had tried to cross there. Now, they did put in a bigger culvert there, but all it takes is one tree and some brush coming down during high water, which on Capitol Creek typically would happen more towards the third week of June rather than the middle.
Are you talking Snowmass Creek or?
No, on Capitol Creek.
Oh, Capitol.
So there are some places where people, their houses aren't gonna get flooded, but they might be stranded and not be able to go to town or go to get groceries or
Sure.
supplies. So I think people who live up some of the valleys where there's a creek going along there where they're going over a bridge or over a culvert to get to their homes, maybe should just be prepared also to be, be stuck at home for a while,
Yep.
just in case
For sure.
something gets washed out and they can't go anywhere.
Just- No, you go.
It's an important reminder. I mean, I think I want to draw the distinction between, providing sandbags for people and also in public safety response. We will continue to provide public safety response to those that are in need. So if there's a public safety issue, call 911. We're going to still come to your house, even if water's coming in your basement. You may not know what to do. That's actually one of the things that we say is unique about the Pickens County Sheriff's Office is it's not always law enforcement. We'll respond to the broken pipe in your basement and help you figure it out. So please, for the public that's listening, please call us if you believe there's a public safety concern or issue in your immediate surrounding area.
I think we can expect a lot of runoff too on the way up 133 because there's still a lot of snow.
Lot of snow,
Like
yeah.
up above Avalanche Ranch and all of that area is going to be pretty treacherous, I think.
And
Just
one of-
east of Aspen as well. Just wanted to ask if there's a plan for east of Aspen. Are we dumping any sand up that way, or what happened? If it,
See, you bring up a really interesting point because it's not only Redstone that's going to have potential flooding and debris flows. Debris flows don't forget the debris flows that could happen as well. So where do you draw the line? It's not just putting a pile of sand in Redstone. So if you directed Public Works to do that, it's a pretty involved, labor-intensive proposition. And, there are pitfalls to sandbagging as well. If you put a sandbag berm around your house, you're diverting it next door. So
Right.
it's not the cure-all. Do things like check your insurance, move anything that could float away, move it to higher ground, have an evac plan or a plan to stay in place. I think things are going to get really interesting. I mean, we hope for the long, slow runoff, but it's so weather dependent, we can't predict it. And everybody, government as well as the public, needs to prepare.
We're supposed to get more snow above 10,000 feet.
Tomorrow.
Oh, God.
Tomorrow night and Thursday.
Alex is our weather person. Tell him about Thursday.
This
And
Thursday?
all next week, right?
Lots of rain.
This Thursday and all next week?
Yeah.
Snow?
Yeah.
Above 10,000.
The Aspen weather
Close.
guys
Good.
put out something
You are
for
close.
Thursday. Yeah.
Guess my tomatoes are coming
good,
back
it was
in the
starting to
house.
feel kind of dry.
And I talked to the Weather
Don't
Service,
eat.
our hydrologist today, and she said Thursday could be interesting. Below 9,000 feet, there could be rain on snow, and that creates issues with debris flows again and high water runoff. So, Francie, long-winded response to you, but no, I'm not trying to minimize what could happen here, just based on who and what I'm listening to.
And we've seen the impacts that have happened in Gunnison County from Highway 133 and the sinkhole and
Oh, God.
the debris that they believe plugged that culvert and then pushed it out into the river and created the sinkhole. It's
That's what
pretty,
they think happened
it's
up there?
Impressive.
Yeah.
But talking to Brian Pettit today, the dike or the levee that they did build in Redstone, keeping the river out of Redstone 15 years ago, that's made a huge difference. The river would be on the boulevard if the county hadn't done that, and they maintain that annually as well. So
Okay, good. I didn't
making
realize
efforts.
annual maintenance on that.
I just
Yes.
remember the extremes we went to when we built that fire station, knowing where we put it and the housing and all those issues, and definitely risks and mitigation could only go so far. It's the only place they could put it.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks for the conversation.
You're
It
welcome.
was good to catch up.
Absolutely.
And so another one, I'll leave you on a dire prediction. So I could have stopped, but
You, not.
this year is special. We are going to have the high water, potential flooding, and then later in the season we will segue into wildfire season. So you can't let your guard down about that. We will have both this year. The fine fuels will be overgrown, and it won't take much to dry them out. So you should also be doing your wildfire mitigation work now too.
And when are we
Started.
draining Grizzly?
It's not happening this year.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
I had a nightmare about it the other day.
No, I wanted to
Reservoir.
bring that up to you because I mentioned it last time I was in here. They've postponed that work for a year.
Yeah.
We had a meeting last week with several of their board members who we hadn't interfaced with before, but we're getting another new dam manager up there, so we met the
Dam
interim
manager?
dam manager, and they're just like us. They want two-way communication with us as much as we want it with them. So they've been really good partners, but I personally was happy they're delaying a year.
It's like
on
all
that-
we
on
need
that
this year on
project.
top of water is water. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Val.
You bet.
Yeah, you guys are the best. You guys do an amazing job, and we so appreciate it.
Another open discussion topic, since that
Oh,
brought one up.
Scott Mattice is
Oh,
on the
is
line.
Scott's there?
if
Oh.
he
Wait, did
wants to
Scott-
add
He's still
something.
waiting. Great.
Oh, yeah,
Got
great.
his hand
Let's
up.
hear from Scott.
Hi, Scott.
Wait, can we up his audio?
Hi, Scott.
Give us
Barely.
just a sec, Scott. We're having an audio problem here.
Can you speak, please?
Good afternoon, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Thank you. Sorry, I was having the same issues, but I can hear you all now, and that's fantastic. I was able to listen to everything, not logged in as a panelist, so I don't have a whole lot to add unless you have questions for me. I think Alex and Valerie summed it up very well.
Well, my next board discussion involves you guys as well, and I will forward that to you. It's a letter from the people at Redstone Ranch Acres. So I'll forward that to Brian, and you guys can work your way through that. I'll talk about it here if you want to stay on. But did you have anything you wanted to add to the last conversation?
No, I think we're good, unless you have questions for me specifically or Brian. Brian's
Okay.
not on there, it's not me.
Okay. Well, I have him. Can I go ahead with this short thing? So this is from Stephen Kent at the Redstone Ranch Acres, and it's just to me, and I haven't had a chance to send it on. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
He says, our evaluation for plowing and maintenance were increased heavily this last tax year. We haven't seen any improvement for the large amount collected in addition to the previous collections. We need to see what the bookkeeping is on the money collected, how it was spent in detail, and what we have left in some account somewhere. Brian Pettit led the fight to get our taxes increased, but offers no help in answering any questions. I find that hard to believe. Where can we go to find out this information? So these are the people where we pass the
They
tax.
get a special
and
district.
So
Yeah. Do you want to forward that to me? And
you'll deal with it?
yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's it. That's all,
My
Scott.
recollection on that was they were raising more money so that then they could
Pay us
pay
back.
for the
Exactly.
snow plowing, the road maintenance
Yeah.
themselves.
They just want to know where the
Not
money
that
is.
the
And pay us
county would be
back. They
doing
also
that.
have,
So
Yeah.
it'll be a special district question that
Yeah.
they may need some education on. We can help with that.
Okay, I'll forward it on to you and Brian.
Okay.
Okay,
Can
hi,
I-
everyone.
Open
Go ahead.
discussion, just, in the news reports I saw last week were about the water district on the Front Range and the Lower Arkansas, and how they've expanded capacity, and they're really excited about diverting more of water from the Roaring Fork and Frying Pan toward the Front Range. It seems that the capacity's increased where they could come and take more water. The previous limitations on water taken from our watershed were due to capacity issues at Pueblo Reservoir, I was understanding. But somehow they've figured out how to take more and use it. And I haven't heard a thing from anybody on this side about that particular news event. It's been in the press off and on for the last month or so. And I was just thinking it'd be good to get an update. Because they're talking about pulling more, maybe the final half of the final 40% of the Roaring Fork out, for something like, could be very significant. And I don't know, honestly, I haven't followed it closely enough to know exactly what they could do, but it sounds as if the designs are to pull it from the Frying Pan and Roaring Fork.
have you asked Laura about this?
That's what I was going to say. We should probably pass it on.
So
to
I'd love to
Laura
ask
or John.
for them to give us a report
Yeah.
at some
Okay.
point.
Because I know Laura and John are both on it after we did the Aurora agreement.
Right, yeah, I'm sure they're paying attention
Yeah,
to
they know
that.
where water is, where water isn't, where water's going, where water should be.
Okay, thank you, that was it.
Thank you. Well, hi, Charlotte. Thank you, guys, for accommodating us. We got a little off schedule today for a couple of reasons. But we are going to have Charlotte present to us some applications for the Planning and Zoning Committee.
Well, first I'm going to do a little cleanup on the packet material.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Apologies for not getting Morgan's resume in that packet.
We don't know anything about Morgan.
And then I also failed to mention that Marianne Maza Pitt was also interviewed on 3/28. So she is another applicant for P&Z. But today we have 3 applicants, and the first is Morgan Boyles.
And we had, just a side note, we had somebody withdraw, Mike Simmons withdrew.
From elections, yes.
I'll make sure.
Correct.
Thank you.
So, Morgan, if you want to come up. Mic's on. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Charlotte.
And I'll let
Hi,
you
Morgan.
guys to
Hi, Francie.
ask
Hi,
away.
everyone.
So why don't you talk to us for just a moment about why you'd like to be on the planning and zoning? I read what you wrote. It was compelling, for sure.
Thank you. So this came about because I've been involved with the growth committee for the past 10 months or so. And that's been a really fascinating process, and also almost like a class in Pickens County Land Use Code and all of its complexities. Also understand there's a tremendous amount I do not know. That's a big part that I've learned from the growth committee, but it was a really positive experience being on the growth committee, and it was a really great group of people, and I think that look forward to talking with you all next week, and some of the things that the committee was able to bring to a consensus, I think, are pretty compelling. So the biggest part of that really is that the driving economic force in our community now is not tourism, it is large-scale home development and maintenance. And so the work that that group has done will now go to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And it's a very exciting time for all of this. Just the article in the paper today about the House bill, there's a lot going on. And so I was encouraged by some of the members of the committee and the staff to apply.
Well, I'm super glad you did. And if you have any questions for Morgan. Yeah.
So it's a huge learning curve, and you jumped in there, so thank you. We know, we talked with staff, and you hung in there. So if you could think of one key thing that you'd like to know more about that you haven't already been swamped with.
I think that the big focus of the growth committee was a lot of aspirational ideas and bigger picture things in terms of house size and potentially even having a tiered system for how houses are reviewed. Smaller houses having a faster review, larger, more impactful houses having a more involved review process. So I'd be interested in learning about how that would actually work with
So would we.
P&Z. I don't know. We had a bunch of wonderful experts in the group, like Glenn Horn and Randy Gold, and of course all of the Ellen and Suzanne and all the staff. But a lot of wonderful ideas were created, but the actual process of implementation.
Yeah, I was going to say the implementation. Here's where we want to go. How do we get there?
And yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, Kelly?
Hi, thanks for applying, and thanks for your service on the growth committee. I consider that like generational effort in Pickens County, so I appreciate your
Do you mean it's going to last for generations, that they're going to be still on the committee?
I don't know. I've lost a lot of sleep over 12:55. But I'm curious, I wasn't sure if just with your experience with the Braun HUD system or otherwise, have been engaged in like a land use application process in front of the county, and if you wouldn't be bored by those reviews, or if you've watched the BOCC's land use hearings, or because that is like a lot of the work of planning and zoning is definitely code and updates and master plans, but then there's the actual project application review.
I have not been involved in a land in a land use application process. Someday we might be.
Yeah,
But that, I think, definitely sort of more directly to the question, I guess the time commitment of planning and zoning, 20 meetings a year, give or take. And I think I could bring a perspective of a younger person, but at the same time, I wouldn't want to get several months or year into the committee and then not being able to uphold that time commitment. So that's my one hesitation, and I was so happy to see Doug Throm and Alan apply as well.
Okay, be good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, Steve?
Well, Morgan, thanks for applying for this. You've been kind of through the trial by fire, being on the Growth Management Committee, and spent lots and lots of times and have gone through a lot of the steep learning curve there, I believe. But the Planning and Zoning Board is a big time commitment. They do get thick packets with a lot of reading, like the land use applications are lengthy. You learn how to read them so you can pick out the really crucial information, but a lot of it is almost boilerplate stuff that you have to learn to, what you need to read. But it is a big time commitment to do all of that, and given your schedule, I presume you would have time, but I want you to address that. Do you have time for a long-term commitment? You've been in a short-term commitment on the growth management
Although it probably
committee.
seemed long.
Yeah.
Yes, I hope that it'd be a similar time commitment. We were meeting bi-weekly with the growth committee. Obviously, there'd be a lot more involved. The packets with the P&Z are a lot more consequential because they're not just recommendations that we then pass on to P&Z, who then pass it. There are people who are there with some very pressing questions, and so yeah, I would want to make sure I'd be able to uphold that commitment.
It's an amazing group of people.
You want to
No, but I would just ask, I always want to hear a little bit about your background with GIS, and, I think that you kind of have, I would guess that it's an attention to detail is something you're good at. And that's kind of what I look for on P&Z is, the detail, the amount of detail and the grasp of it is pretty important. And I'm not sure, is that daunting to you, or is it appealing? I guess. I think I know the answer, but I just want to hear what you think about it.
Well, I think parts of it are appealing, and I think for all of you, the parts that are appealing are the big picture things as they relate to our whole community. When you're dealing with an individual's specific project and request, that's a more difficult situation. But in terms of GIS, I'm familiar with something I studied in college, worked for a study abroad program teaching, and then did a very short bit of contract work for Mary Lackner with the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board. So I'm familiar with all the tools that that our land use planners use, and also just I've had some experience working for architects as well. So.
I saw that you were in Monteverde for a while.
Yes.
How long were you there?
I did 3 semester-long programs, so come back and forth. It was a summer program and then 2 fall programs. I was working for the University of California's Education Abroad program, and just helping tropical biology students bring mapping into their projects. And it was a wonderful community and a
It's
unique land
wonderful
use
place.
planning thing, actually. 'Cause
It's a
they
really great place.
conserve their watershed.
Yeah, I took my 8th graders for 9 years in a row to San Luis.
Oh, wonderful.
But we would take public transportation in Monteverde, and then we would hike down the Sendero to the Eco Lodge in San Luis and stay in San Luis, do community service and education down there. It was really great. I love Monteverde. So, yeah. Patty?
Well, since you're gonna look at his resume, do you still make French bread?
I was going to ask that.
I did that at Bonnie's.
Will you reveal the recipe?
Smell it, just the thought of it. A very diverse resume, as you
How
can
do you
tell.
get the crust at 9,000 feet?
Yeah.
Spray bottle, yeah.
Little inside secret.
Well, thank you so
Yeah,
much for
thanks,
applying.
Brian.
I'm really
Appreciate it.
happy that you applied, and, we'd love to see the experience you've had with the Grove Committee carry forward.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, thanks for your
Charlotte
time.
will be in touch with you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Also so happy that Doug and Alan have applied.
Perhaps you could bring some French bread next time.
Can't you I could just smell
I'm
it.
going to ask Alan the same question.
Better check with John Ely to see if that would be
Yeah,
kosher.
bribery.
Yeah,
You just have to
really.
disclose it.
Did he say kosher? Did he say what he said?
No, it's a bribe.
Come on up. How are you?
No, he can do French bread as well as Morgan, so it really evens everything out.
So just one note here, you can come over here. Alan is an employee, but the attorney's office has been contacted, and there's nothing in the home rule charter that prevents him from applying.
Okay, thank you. We were wondering about that. Yeah. Well, welcome, and thank you for applying. It's a really big commitment. I've seen the packets. They are definitely daunting. And the detail work is daunting as well. But tell us why you're interested in being on planning and zoning.
Well, it's kind of an interesting story. 30 years ago, when I was in college, I wrote a honors thesis on coercion theory and land use involving all these Forest Service land swaps with ski areas and things like that. After graduation, I got into the restaurant business and really never looked back. Right, so I've been doing that 30 years. I've been in the food and beverage industry, own my own business here, and have just kind of raised our daughter. My wife and I raised our daughter here. She's off to college. And, have more time on my hands. I've become more interested in the community that I've been a part of for 30 years. And so I approached Suzanne about becoming involved with the county, working in community development. I worked there part-time with special permits or special event permits. And, I just want to, this is a part of my process for learning more about the land use code, being more involved in the community that I've lived in for a long time, but have kind of had, as I like to say, my blinders on to a certain point, like focused on what I've done for a long time. And I'm just really interested in learning and being more part of the community outside of the world in which I've existed for 30 years. And I really think that land use is something I'm particularly interested in, not only for my history of back when I was in school, but also because of all the ways that land use code applies to every factor of what goes on here, environmental sustainability, conservation of it, just how it affects the community we live in, and I want to be involved in that process in whatever way I can be, whether it's working, with ComDev and being part of P&Z or any other opportunities. So I'm seeing this as a process of something that I'm very interested and passionate about, but I'm starting to insert myself into that passion, I suppose.
Well, you must have a lot of perseverance and grit to be in the restaurant business for 30 years in Aspen. That's impressive. That speaks well for you.
Well, yeah.
Not many people last that long.
It will wear
Definitely
you down.
perseverance.
So do we have questions for Alan? Yeah, Steve?
Well, I was curious how you got into the special events permit part of ComDev. I'm assuming that probably through your business you were catering events that people had to get special use permits, but I want to hear it from you how the transition from a catering business to special events permits.
Right. So after my daughter went away to school, I found we have a little more time on my hands. And honestly, it's kind of a long story. Our catering business has sort of started to wind down a little bit. right? After COVID, everything just was weird. I started to look, I was interested in other outlets. I always thought working for the county would be interesting. I've known, have a lot of friends that work for the county, and just ran across I believe it was in the paper, something about, working for the county special event permit. I'm like, well, I do special events. It seemed like it could be an interesting way for me to use in some way the skills that I had been developing or working on for all these years, and crossing that with something that I'm interested in, which is land use. And talked with Suzanne about potential conflicts and things like that. I didn't really see it. Most of the special event permits that we work on, those, as a caterer in town, I don't think I was ever involved with actually doing any of the permitting process that I'm working on now. That's usually left to property owners, property managers, the large event planners, people that I have relationships with by being a caterer, but as a caterer, never really worked on that permitting side of the process. And our business, typically the permits that I work on are these really big, elaborate events, whether it's something like X Games, a large backcountry event. My catering has been more focused on nonprofits, weddings, social events, things like that. There wasn't a lot of crossover in that world with the business that we had, except for the relationships that I have with the event planners and property managers and people that I'm sort of, kind of dealing with right now. Hope that answers your question.
Okay.
Anybody else?
And could you speak to, I'm not sure what the exact decision is, like if you were appointed to the Planning and Zoning Board, do you see that you would have a conflict with working at ComDev on special events, or would you need to resign from that position? In your mind, what would be the best tactic for you?
Well, I've had some discussions and kind of thought exercises about that, and couldn't really run across an issue that I think would be a conflict. Obviously, I don't know the ins and outs of the P&Z commission and all the detail and everything that is involved with that. It would be a learning curve for sure. I almost think that the conflict of interest could be more that I'm a resident of maybe east of Aspen caucus, right? As far as being involved in any kind of land use decision. I don't know how that works with, where you reside and, being part of the commission or anything like that. So I don't think that there is an evident conflict that, or an apparent one at this point that we've been able to kind of nail down.
So are you active in the East of Aspen caucus?
No.
As a board member or
The bigger
participant?
question, is the East of Aspen caucus active?
Yeah,
Well,
I have been active in I do live in Stillwater Ranch HOA, and I have been, I'm not currently on the board, but I have been over several, iterations on the
Great
board
spot.
there.
Mhm.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Okay.
we're
Thank
very
you.
lucky to live there.
Well, thanks for applying.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Gilly?
Hi, nice to meet you. Thank you for applying for this. I'm wondering, is there aspects of the land use code that jump out to you? Are we getting it right? Are there areas where you're frustrated by, based on what you know?
I wouldn't say that I've been working for the county part-time for about 9 months now. So most of that time I've been focused on my section of the land use code, right? So, which is special events and how that applies. And I've always looked at my role is to take that code and apply it and not analyze it. Mm-hmm. So I would say up to now, no, I don't have any particular judgment on whether, I agree with the code or not. I've just worked with using what's in the code to apply it to my job.
But nothing like why would they let someone build a house there?
What were they thinking?
Yeah.
Well, I do walk up and down, I'm outdoors all the time and, and notice things for sure.
You could say that, is what you're saying.
He's never thought that when he walks by those houses.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I don't think I have a question. I just want to thank you for coming in and applying. This is a unique situation where I feel like I know every applicant so well. I wish we had room for 3 on the board.
Yeah, I wish we did too.
But thank you for coming in, and I appreciate hearing more and learning more about your history in the town. And you've been here 3 decades, which is you've seen. All you have to do is leave town for 2 weeks to see how much the valley and the community changes. So you've seen a lot of it, and you have history here, which is really good to know. And I'm trying. The only thing I would ask you about would be the French bread, but
Dying smelling again.
Alan's daughter is a best friend of my daughter's, and she's a baker, right? She loves to bake.
She is a baker.
So I don't know if you know the
Yes.
French bread secret, but she does, perhaps.
My daughter had a catering company in Boulder called the Whole Shebang. And so I worked with her quite a bit, and we've done a little bit of catering up here, not recently, because we both get such bad caterers back that now that's what we refer to when our back
Caterers
go bad.
back.
It's like caterers back. So it's a hard job. It's a hard job.
So does the name Epicure Catering come from the Epicure restaurant in Aspen, or was it an original name?
Ernst
for
Martin.
And that was John Bennett's place, right?
No, he's Port
No,
La France.
before him.
But I thought
Epicure was Ernst Martin. I
But it
thought.
was where Port La France
Right,
was, I believe,
similar
which was
location.
before my
Yeah.
time.
Epicure was
So
in the corner.
there's not a specific story to that. However, when we were trying to decide on a name, I was doing some research, and I did research about the old Epicure that was the coffee shop on Main Street. And I think a lot of that, I think the word also, I was always a big philosophy Greek student, and it's a Greek, it's one of those words that I've always just liked a lot.
Are you Epicure or Epicurious?
Epicure.
And so Epicurious was in the Mid-Valley, and that was a catering company too, wasn't it?
Correct, yes. So we have been, for 22 years, been renting the kitchen at the Mountain Chalet Hotel.
Oh, that's right.
So we don't have a retail space, we just utilize that as a commercial
Right.
production kitchen there at the hotel,
Mm-hmm.
which is still operating and TBD, right?
Yeah,
So-
with 2 weeks and it'll change, right, Greg? Yeah, thanks. I
Yeah.
think it's great that you are being brave and bold and coming from your nice quiet desk up there to this table where they have the meetings. It's a very interesting discussion that they have in P and Z.
Great.
Thank you very
Well,
much,
thanks for
Alan, for
considering
applying.
me.
Thanks, thank you.
And Charlotte will let you know how
Okay,
things
thank
move
you.
along.
Thanks, Alan.
Okay, and next we have
Next
Doug
victim.
Thrum.
Hi.
Welcome.
Doug.
Hi, Doug.
Welcome.
Good to see you.
Well, I think I know that your interest has probably grown out of the growth committee as well, and your career. So why don't you tell us why you'd like to be on P and Z?
The growth committee has been very interesting. I've really enjoyed the process. It's been long, and I've learned a lot about, I think, the way the process works. And so it's given me more impetus to, maybe give back more. I am working less. I'm a general contractor. I think I'm a lifelong resident of the county. And I'm a general contractor. I'm working less, not doing much construction these days, but essentially working for only past clients. And so doing things for the community feels like the right thing to do.
That's really nice to
You
hear.
mentioned the retirement word recently.
I'm trying it out, not completely successessly, but not working as much.
I tried it too, and then I ended up here.
Right. Exactly. It's not
Do we have
easy.
questions for Doug?
No, it's just nice to see you. I haven't seen you since, I think, our joint meeting when we first opened up the community.
Yes.
Growth Committee, which was an amazing first opening meeting.
I think that, like I said, it's been 10 months, and it doesn't seem like it's been 10 months, but.
Not since I've last seen you, no, it doesn't.
But that's what, I think that we've been meeting for quite a while with that group. We're done, sort of. I think that, I believe, something is- you guys
He's an
are
optimist.
going to you guys.
Come to us, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like you're retired, kind of like you're done, yeah.
exactly.
But you're still coming to us, right?
Yeah.
Like the
June
17th, there's one thing, but I think that the report, I think we've signed off kind of on the report.
That will happen in a week.
And, okay, well, so,
You're
we
close,
haven't seen
you're
it.
close.
We're
You're
close.
expecting everybody to sign off on it?
Yes,
Good.
Whoa, that was.
Lots of
that was an
consensus, I would-
instant
I would,
that was a
say.
good yes.
yeah.
Have you found as a contractor that any places where you were frustrated by our land use codes?
Absolutely.
Such as?
One of the goals that we spoke about in the growth committee was simplicity, and it's just not possible for what we're trying to achieve. And so the fact that there's frustrations is just part of the system. I think that making it as clear and straightforward and understandable as possible is a great goal, but I think more important is the pieces that we're trying to achieve as far as the land use controls. So, is it frustrating? Absolutely. Does that mean it's not done correctly? I couldn't say that.
So
I
we
think
can
that-
expect more complexity.
Well, we've tried to provide some clarity, but it's not simple.
Yeah. And so were staff sort of the aid between the written land use and what you
Staff was
needed to do?
amazing.
Yeah, I think so.
Staff is amazing.
Staff was absolutely amazing, yes.
Steve?
Yeah, you served a long time on the Snowmass Water and Sand Board.
Yes.
And I see you took a break and then you came back.
They
Came
term
back to
limited
it.
me, they kicked me off. And then the gentleman that I had took my place, he was on it for 5 or 6 years, Tim Belinsky, and then he moved out of the district. And they asked me to come back, and I find the water really interesting. And so I said, sure, I'd love to be involved again. And I'll be term limited on that again in, I don't know, another 4 or 5 years.
So I see that there's a lot of connection between water availability and water use and land use.
Yeah.
Could you give us your viewpoint on that? And, you're looking at the microcosm of Snowmass Village, but it sort of
Right.
applies to the bigger area of the whole Colorado River
Yeah.
basin.
Water use, Colorado River water is obviously a huge issue and in the news and important, extremely important, obviously. As far as controlling growth with it, the goal of the SWSD is not to control growth through it. That's what we've talked about since I was on it originally, 15 plus years ago. In Snowmass, we do have a set number of EQRs, essentially units, that I've been very strong saying that we can't go over that. Residential water use is not the issue. Essentially, residential water use is 80 to 90% recycled. So that's not the issue. The issue is irrigation, essentially outside use. It's something we discussed to some extent in the growth committee. It certainly wasn't the focus. It's going to be in there, but it's not as high a priority as maybe some people think it should be. But water is, controlling. What I've said about the whole thing is that we need to educate the populace to living in Western Colorado. They need to understand our values in the community, not bringing their values and trying to change us to lawns and fountains and all that kind of stuff. That doesn't work here. And so that was my interest in the growth committee as well. The community's changing, but Aspen's pretty small. Picken County's a pretty small place still, and it's quite a community. I don't want the community to be changed.
Okay, thank you.
I shouldn't say that. The community is gonna change. The world's changing. But but, you know, the people that are here, the local people, you know, need to control the conversation. The people that come in need to adjust to our values.
Kelly?
Well, you've covered a lot of what I would ask. I'm curious, do you have a favorite place in Picken County?
A favorite place in Picken County? Highlands
Over all the
Bowl.
years.
What?
Highlands Bowl, in the winter,
Yeah, I can go there.
the summer. You know, they're too numerable to list, and I wouldn't want to list them
Sure.
because
You want people to know?
exactly my favorite place.
Where to find you?
You're not going to commit the sins of Outside Magazine?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm not going to list it as one of the great places in Aspen.
Just like I say, I'm gonna retire in McCoy. People go, where's McCoy? I said, that's why I'm gonna retire there.
I would just ask, this is great, Doug. I appreciate it. I've known Doug like I've known Morgan and Alan pretty well for quite a long time. But it's interesting to hear something that came up earlier. You know, where do you think our economy is, and where do you think our focus is? Where's the industry? Is it, you know, there's discussion whether we're a ski town or a real estate town or a shopping town. Like what? You know, what are we striving for as we're working with these codes? What are we trying to maintain or protect or encourage?
You know, I think that we can still call ourselves a ski town. I think Mike Kaplan was a big piece of that. I hope that the new guy is the same thing. But we're not a ski economy. I mean, the skiing is important, obviously. It's a huge component. But we really are a property management, development, construction community. That's where the workforce is. That's where the income is, in my opinion. You know, I think that's, you know, right or wrong, but that's where all the labor is being. That's where the labor force is employed, I would say.
And that would mean that the work that you do on the growth committee affects the majority of the population, rather than if you were making a decision about SKICO or something.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was discussed at the growth committee for sure that, you know, the fact that the labor force is working in the construction industry or the property management or whatever, as opposed to in the ski industry.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Doug. I really appreciate
You
it.
bake?
Morgan is incredibly bright. I would support his appointment for sure.
We belong to a mutual admiration society.
Up to 9, right?
Oh, we can add more?
Maybe a
You're saying we
law.
can add more?
Yeah.
That's what the bylaws say, 3.
I know, this is, you guys are not making it
Yeah,
easy
let's put them all
by any
three on.
means.
You guys are all awesome. That was
Yeah.
really
Thanks for
enjoyable.
coming.
Appreciate
Thank you
it.
so much.
It's going to be a tough decision.
So
Can we
there's a
punt?
few
Yeah, all three.
decisions, and
There's what?
a few decisions that have
One's
to be
leaving.
made. And I do know that our APSHA applicant is being interviewed Monday by council. So once I hear back from them, I'll bring back all of the decisions that need to
Stop it, you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Charlotte.
Thank you.
Thank you,
So
Ms.
will
Jarrett.
we interview that
Candidates.
person?
Yeah, the abstract,
2 seconds?
APSHA?
Last week.
We did.
you weren't
Oh, I
here.
wasn't here. Okay.
Yeah.
Make sure your
You
mic's
should
on.
look at the
I wasn't.
interview.
Okay.
The
Yeah, you
capabilities.
should.
Okay. Hi.
Just quickly, I'm not giving 2 cents on the applicants. So right now, we have 6 members on the P and Z. The bylaws allow up to 9. We've kind of went back to having 7 because that felt like a really comfortable number for us to work with. With 7, we have a 4-member quorum. If we go to 8 or 9, we have to have a 5-member quorum for every meeting. So again, that's just to put that out there, since you mentioned.
So it's possible.
We can only, right, we can have up to 9 members. I think we got there at one point. We usually ended up at 8. At 8, it makes it more difficult for us to meet that 5-person quorum. So we were struggling with that. So that's why I think previously, we'd said, let's get back to 7. That seems like a good number for us. But just so you know, that is a possibility.
Have you had a problem making quorum with 7?
We haven't had quorum issues
I don't think so.
in recent time. And probably to some of that is Zoom meetings.
Yeah.
All right.
Again, so we have just with the P and Z in the last several months gone back to trying to get everyone to meet in person with an option for virtual if they can participate but can't be here in person. But, so we've just had our last few meetings of actually being back in the room
Right, to
with the
blend it.
P&Z. But I do think that has changed people being like, oh, it's easier for me to jump in because I can do it from wherever I am.
Where did they meet?
Here,
Here, this room.
right here.
And where do the current members live? So Joe Kraubacher,
Joe is in
Graybacher.
Woody Creek. We have Woody Creek.
Suzanne,
We have Old Snowmass, we have
Chelsea
Suzanne
lives
is
in
Meadowwood.
town.
Meadowwood.
Old Snowmass.
Jeffries,
Oh, no, yeah,
Gateway
Suzanne is in
Mesa.
Meadowwood, yeah, Old Snowmass. Zach, I don't know where Zach,
Zach's over here in
Zach
town.
lives
at
in town.
Benedict.
nobody from Down Valley.
No, we don't have anyone.
Last time we had Down
farther.
Valley was Peter Martin. from
Jeffrey's the
Redstone.
farthest down Valley, I think.
Yeah,
it's
used
like
to have Peter Martin
Where's
at
Jeffrey
Redstone.
live?
And Monty
Gateway
was in
Mesa
Woody
and
Creek,
Snowmass
Gateway
Creek.
now.
yeah.
I was just
Very Esmond.
thinking one thing that appeals to me about for contemplating expanding it, since the quorum doesn't seem to be as big an issue as it was before, was just that it seems as if the growth committee is inspiring a lot of people to get involved, and I really appreciate that. And if this is an obvious next step and we have the capacity for them, it just might be an obvious next step as part of the, creating the institutional knowledge. And so that's an appealing thought to me. I just wanted to bring that up. 'Cause I would certainly contemplate it when we come down to making appointments.
Especially with the quality of these candidates,
Yeah, they've been
And
to
diversity.
college. They've been to
And
a
diversity.
10-month
except for the.
training program.
Except for
They
the
know
French
more than
bread,
we do.
did you say?
Except for where they live.
I thought you said French bread.
Thanks, Suzanne.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Suzanne.
thanks, Suzanne.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you.
Okay, future agendas. Got anything for us?
I do not.
I have one thing, two things.
Yeah, what do you have?
Second reading for the redistricting is now scheduled for the 24th. John, we may want to look at that, not forget.
Yeah, we're gonna relook at all
Okay.
those, yeah.
And the airport open house, I thought it was the 11th, the first day we closed the airport.
Yeah, so.
We
it-
changed that?
It did get changed, and I'm just on
It's the
reentry, and I can't
22nd.
remember,
It's the
yeah.
22nd, but
22nd.
when does the airport reopen?
24.
24th.
Okay, so I
yeah.
wanted to make sure we
What are
were,
you talking about? I'll make
the airport open house.
The airport open house, we had originally scheduled for May 11th.
I thought
think
I was
that's
really
what
getting
I
confused.
told you, no, and we had to change it, and I can't remember the exact
Well,
reason
we have
for
an
that now.
airport meeting that same day. I think the safety group's meeting on the 11th, and I don't know what else, but
What is the
There was
airport
something
open
else.
house? What is it?
what is it? We get to go in and show people around the airport because it'll be closed. They can come and go and behind the scenes and up and down the runway and.
Yeah, we're
we
gonna
have
do
to-
tours and, kind of talk about the vision committee recommendations and what's coming out of it's an opportunity to share information with the public.
So it's a meeting and then tours or something?
Open house, yeah, we'll have
Oh,
two
open house.
opportunities for open house and sharing of information and tours.
Are we supposed to go to that?
You are welcome to go to that.
I'm planning
yes.
to go. I was planning to go on Thursday, but Tommy's got doctor's appointments, but he's got doctor's appointments that day too, but I'll figure it out.
So what's the time schedule for that?
Noon to 6:30.
Can we have a bicycle
Whoa.
race down
But
the
it's like
runway?
noon to 2 and then.
Yeah, it's like an
4:30 to
all day, come and
6:30.
go.
Yeah, I was,
We'll get information.
that's gonna
out.
work for me on the 22nd. It wasn't working
Yeah.
on.
Well, and Greg wasn't gonna be able, because that's, Greg already had two other meetings, now
Conflicts, yeah,
now he
so this
doesn't. only-
this is better.
yeah. So those are my only two
When are we
things
going to
so far.
Redstone? The 18th?
Yes. A week from Thursday.
You're 28 minutes ahead of schedule here.
Isn't that great? Except it's gonna come back at us when we actually do discuss districting.
What are we gonna discuss?
I'm just looking at,
'Cause I just, in the midst of everything,
So
my
next
car
week.
won't start, so I had to rent a car, but the guy just called me, so I need to find out. I know. Anything else? And somebody breached my county insurance plan and was making claims on my county insurance card.
Oh, really?
I'm like,
Wow,
anything
haven't
else
heard
you
of
guys
that.
could figure out to throw at me? So I'm just gonna
Did,
step
did
back.
they
we're
did they
ready to get
contact
done.
you and ask you
Yeah.
about it? Or did you
No,
find?
I got a bill for somebody I didn't know, and they
attention.
called me Catherine.
Oh.
I think we're going to adjourn now.
I should check my.
Grassroots.
Oh, perfect.
Thank you, Andorra.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tomorrow noontime, right?